The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Becker?
Here.
Maloney? Here. McCoy? Here. Sitnikov?
Here. Here.
Shelton?
Here.
Vandenhoevel?
Here.
Warren?
Here. All 7 board members are present, and then I'll introduce the rest of the table when we come back. And I asked Eric to read the motion to convene in closed session.
I move that the board convene in closed session in room 337 pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85 paren 1 paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, superintendent search. The board will reconvene in open session at 6 p.m. pursuant to section 19.85 paren 2 Wisconsin statute to consider the balance of the agenda, which will include an open forum, system and monitoring reports, and the superintendent's update. The board may reconvene in closed session after the conclusion of the regular board meeting for such reasons noted in this posting and pursuant to a proper motion. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Is there a second? Second. Sandy?
McCoy? Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. We'll convene across the hall.
Pursuant to section 19.85 paren 2 Wisconsin statutes to consider the balance of the agenda.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, sorry, I forgot we have to take, I need a second on the motion to reconvene in open session.
Second.
Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. Then I've asked Rhonda Sitnikov to read our mission statement, please.
We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Thank you, Rhonda. And before we move on to collaborative commitments, I just want to say we took roll call before we went into closed session at 5 o'clock. All 7 board members are present. Joined with us at the table is Dr. Langenfeld to my left, Sandy Heller, our board secretary, who's at my far left, and we have 2 Intercity Student Council members here today. Luke Pisani, who's from the president of Intercity Student Council, and he's from Southwest High School, and Greta Hansen, who's also from Southwest High School. Hi, Greta. Next, we have our collaborative commitments, and these were commitments that the board developed together and adopted on September 24th, 2019, and we read them before our regular board meeting. So we're going to start with Eric and go to Andrew and move around the table that way.
All right, we will strive to review board materials and seek clarifying information before board meetings.
We will embrace diverse views and perspectives as a path to effective solutions.
We will show consideration to everyone, fellow school board members, staff, students, families, and community members in our speech and behavior.
We will consider the merits of ideas as the primary driver of our decisions.
We will offer our comments efficiently and succinctly and avoid repetition in order to keep board members to a reasonable length. Board meetings. That too. Thank you.
We will create equitable and inclusive opportunities to promote community engagement.
We will engage in conversations in a way that allows for all perspectives to be shared, considered, and valued. Next is our open forum. And before we start that, I just want to remind members of the public that you can view the board agenda and all the handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. Click on Our District across the top and then Board of Education on the left menu. And on the next left menu, you will find a link to agendas and minutes. This link will take you to a website called Agenda Manager, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from the current board meeting and prior board meetings are housed. And the board will provide our community with two different opportunities during tonight's meeting to speak before the board. The first opportunity is next during our open forum. The second opportunity is during agenda items where indicated by public comment on our agenda. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak. If you wish to speak during tonight's open forum, you may do so with respect to items that are either posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meeting laws prohibit the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board will also permit public comment during agenda items as noted. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. The process for speaking during a specific agenda item is as follows. The board will first hear the presentation and discuss the agenda item before calling on those who desire to speak. If you want to speak during a specific agenda item, please fill out a green form and give it to the board secretary, Sandy, at any point during the meeting. If you desire to speak and haven't yet filled out a form, just indicate that to the board secretary and you can fill out a form afterwards. The board secretary will provide the names of those wishing to speak to the board member conducting that part of the meeting, and you will be called upon to speak at the appropriate time. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. If your comments are going to be longer than 5 minutes, please submit written comments. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. So we have two people that have indicated a desire to speak during the open forum, and the first person is Marlene Farah, okay.
Yes. If you push the button in the middle, push the button that has the profile and the voice coming out.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm Marlene Farah with the local Italian-American Club. With us tonight, we have our president, Teofilo, vice president, Dick Daly, and two board members, Sue Malewski and Lynn Thompson, and also the Italian language teacher here in Green Bay, Karen Harble-Marshall. Right now, I'd like to introduce you my son, Nick, and he's going to tell you why we're here.
Each year.
Nick, can you put, now you have to press yours. There you go.
I just did that for her. So each year, a state organization, Wisitalia, makes a donation to the Green Bay Italian language program at Preble High School in the name of and in tribute to my father, Peter Farah, who was instrumental in getting the Italian language included into the Green Bay school curriculum. It's my understanding that Karen submitted a grant request to Wisitalia that was almost double what the request was in the past to help fund additional activities for the class within the community. And pleased to announce that Wisatalia has agreed to meet that request in full. So on behalf of Wisatalia and Club Italo Americano of Green Bay, I'd like to present this check to Preble High School in the amount of $3,020, representing additional local and statewide support for the program.
Thank you very much.
As the board treasurer, I will gladly accept it.
And Lori's going to take some pictures, and I don't know if the other board members and teacher that are here want to come up and be part of the picture.
It would be good.
You want it in front of the,
Yeah, why don't we put it in front of?
Okay.
Except don't trip over all our stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here, I don't want to be in the picture, so I'm going to get out of the way.
when you come.
It's fun getting credit for money in the picture. Sure. Can somebody
Oh, we're doing this one?
Thank you.
We're gonna email it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm like, I need.
So he can.
One more.
You want one, Lori?
Okay, it's easier for you to move than
Dick.
us.
Dick should be in this picture.
Dick, come on in.
Dick. Is everybody?
No? Okay. He's choosing not to.
Oh, Heather needs one too.
Yep, I need Heather out of the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wait, one more.
Lori, you're in this.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Glad we could be there for that.
Thank you so much. It's always so good to see you very much. Thank you.
I suppose I have to turn this
Thank you.
in.
Grazie.
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 Always reminded of Chris.
The next group that is a group that would like to speak. Sherry Cervase, Cheryl Martinson, I think, and Donna Skarzneski.
Okay.
Yeah, push the. It's a face profile with sound coming out of the person's mouth.
Oh, sorry.
And as soon as someone else touches their button, you cut the speaker off. So be careful if you're all going to speak, that you don't cut yourselves off.
Okay. Should I say my name and address?
Yes.
My name is Sherry Service, and I live at 2486 Spica Lane, Green Bay, Wisconsin, 54311.
My name is Donna Skarzinski, and I live at 225 Camila Lane, Green Bay.
Cheryl Martinson, 992 Shoemaker Point Road, Brussels, Wisconsin, 54204.
Should I start?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I just want to say, first of all, that this is the first time that all three of us are in the same room together. We have a concern about the management at the Edison Middle School lunchroom in Green Bay. It was only through basically an accident that Cheryl and I met, and then she introduced me to Donna, and we had very similar experiences there. So we just really wanted to give a voice to those that are fearful to say anything. And so that's why we're here tonight. So I just wanted to say again that Donna and Cheryl and I only met recently, and in an unexpected coincidence discovered that we shared similar experiences while employed at the Green Bay Edison Middle School lunchroom. Sherry had left her position at the Edison lunchroom about 2 years prior to me being hired, and Donna also 2 years before being hired. But we found that we had witnessed and experienced behaviors not conducive to a healthy work environment. We believe that there is a pattern, and it is important that someone take a serious look at the way employees are managed at that location. For entry-level employees that are new, it is difficult to confront these behaviors. It is intimidating, and there is a fear of increased employee hostility, loss of benefits, or possible job loss. And it is even more painful to feel that you are not being heard. We are here to give voice to those employees. We are now since gone. We are all now gainfully employed, and we felt that we had a duty to come forward because we were able to leave. But many people cannot, and maybe they're a single parent, maybe they're the person holding all the benefits, but they are fearful to come forward, so we are coming forward for them. We want to acknowledge that we found the Edison principals, their office personnel, their educators, and custodial staff to be professional and supportive. The Edison students were helpful, kind, intelligent, patient, respectful. It was an absolute joy to serve them. We did not want to leave our jobs at Edison. We enjoyed the demanding work and fast-paced nature of our job, but could not tolerate the behaviors exhibited. At orientation, we received our employee handbook, our guide for policies and procedures. Under the heading Discrimination, Harassment, and Bullying, it states, the Green Bay Area School District is dedicated to providing a safe, respectful work environment for all employees. All district employees have that right to work in an environment free of all forms of harassment and where they are treated with respect and dignity. The district will not tolerate or allow harassment or bullying by any employee or non-employee who conducts business with the district. At the Edison Middle School lunchroom, we were told not to help an employee that had many students waiting in line to be served. When asked to speak to the supervisor privately, an employee was allowed to stay and listen. Was shamed by supervisor with employee joining in, as I had just finished serving a child. When helping out with dishes, heard an employee yell loudly, "Where the blank is so-and-so in those goddamn dishes?" The supervisor displayed obvious favoritism by delegating specific workstations that required heavy lifting and numerous steps to complete. Then, when falling behind, was told to be faster the following day. On a daily basis, we were demeaned, isolated, criticized, at times felt sabotaged in our daily tasks. We were shouted at in a condescending tone, always in front of fellow employees, and at times students. The supervisor and head cook made the conscious decision to stand, watch, and belittle an employee that was struggling to complete all tasks in a timely manner, in a station where they had not even been trained. It was cruel and intolerable. We followed all policies and procedures to bring this to the administration's attention. We filed a formal complaint so that no other employees would be subjected to the intolerable working conditions. The results of my investigation said, while you were not subject to workplace harassment and or bullying, the district did find that there was not a pattern of communication similar to what I had reported. Rather, a communication was consistent between all food service employees and done in a very respectful, professional manner. I'm sorry, I just have a small part
Go
left.
ahead and finish. I can see you're almost done.
The conduct did not substantially interfere with your work or create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. During my investigation, I made administration aware that myself and a fellow employee were being bullied. If it was found that all employees communicated in a respectful and consistent manner, why was my fellow employee moved to another location during the investigation? We were told at orientation that if you see something, you say something, and we are saying something, and we're asking you to hear us and listen. Thank you. That's all we have to say.
Can I just say one statement? I would just like to add that when I did bring this to Human Resources' attention, twice now, and that person, 3 years ago, that person in question, the head cook, at that time the assistant cook, was written up, and then she was also written up again for the same thing. And then the last time, Lynette Zalik, who is the director of food service, told me that it was just my perception that It's just the way that I was perceiving everything. And in talking to Sherry, she was told the exact same thing. Sherry also here, this Sherry was told the exact same thing as well. There's also 2 other people that are no longer working at Edison, and they went through the exact same thing with all the bullying that was going on. And I went to counseling, and they told me to get out of the toxic situation. But when you hold the insurance, your hands are tied. So the director of food service told Randy Etten that she would take care of it, and I was just pushed under the rug and brought over to the production center. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
One more thing. What was very difficult for me is that these are excellent jobs. There's no better job than working with the school system. And people do not leave these jobs, not unless things are very bad. So some people just sit there and take it and are treated very badly every single day. But we have a chance to make it better. And so we are hoping that we can persuade you to really closely look at that one area that it seems to have a very serious problem.
Thank you, Sherry, and yeah, go ahead, Michelle. Sure, Dr. Langenfeld has a question, I think.
Thank you for coming forward. I know that Terry Willems, our new Director of Human Resources, is here tonight as well. And I think it would be appropriate to get the contact information and follow up. And I know that Mike Stengel is here, who supervises food service. So both of them were able to hear what you had to share, and they will be looking more deeply into this. And Terry can certainly get your contact information if you'd all be willing to speak with her. So.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Christina.
Can you just provide some context how long this is, from your perspective, how many years this has been going on?
Well, for me personally, I was there for 5 weeks, and it was so intolerable that I literally left the job right during the lunch hour because the supervisor literally turned to me. I mean, I was running like my hair was on fire, and she and the head cook just stood there watching me, and were berating me the whole time. And when I kind of called her on it, I said, I am feeding a child right now. She said, well, I just don't think you can handle your job duties. And then another employee jumped in and said, yeah, Sherry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
This is getting into other questions.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, but I'm just saying that
How long ago did it start, I think is what Christina, how many years ago did you become aware of this?
Sure.
And then we should, yeah.
My situation was when I first got my 6.5-hour position over at Edison, I was currently working a 4.5-hour job there. Also,
No, we can't say,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay, so that was approximately 6 years ago.
Okay, so it's
it has
been
been going on.
at least
Yes.
6 years, thank you. That's what you were asking, Christina, right? Okay. Okay.
Thank you for coming in and sharing this information. So what you're saying, you're no longer working. Okay, you're coming forward to speak for those who are currently working. Okay, just wanted to. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, next is, I would entertain a motion, is there anyone else who'd like to speak during the open forum? All right, seeing none, then we'll move on to, I'll entertain the motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes have been approved. Next is monitoring reports, and that will be facilitated by Laura McCoy.
Actually, Brenda, and we, in our meeting, agreed that Rhonda would handle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It will be facilitated by Rhonda Sitnikow.
And you're gonna have to give me a couple minutes because I've never done this before. So
No worries.
I believe we're gonna have a presentation on the NEW School of Innovation and the John Dewey Learning Academy. And at the table is Jason Johnson, Jen Egamite, and I'm going to space the last name. Renee Every, thank you. I knew Renee, but. And Vicki Byer. Thank you, Vicki.
Thanks, Ms. Sitnikow. Before I turn it over to the team, I just want to acknowledge the great leadership of the three people sitting at the table next to me. It's through their innovative thinking and desire to make sure we meet the needs of all students in the district that they sit before you tonight to give an update. So with that, Ms. Every.
With me is Jen Agamite, who is the principal at John Dewey Academy of Learning, and Jason Johnson, who is the principal at Northeast Wisconsin School of Innovation, which also includes the Academy program. They're each going to be doing an individual report, and then we will take questions after both of them have presented.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I just wanted to provide a few things that our parents are saying about us to give some context of some of the success and the things they're seeing. We've had students that show up every day who previously don't go to school. We have parents come in the building and say, our son is excited to be here. I cannot get him here soon enough. And this is someone who explained that they used to drag him out of bed every day and kind of fight that battle. Other things, they're so excited to do the hands-on learning, to participate in NWTC. They look forward to coming to school. They don't want to miss out on anything. We've had parents say to us, this is something that would have kept me in school if I had an opportunity like this. Recently, our school social worker was working with Robin Tinnen, who's working with our students outside in the community, and she's telling us that our students are telling her they're comfortable, they feel like family, they're really becoming acclimated to the situation, and they're ready to take that next step. The next piece I'd like to talk about is our NWTC experience. All of our students in grades 7 through 9 have completed 2 rotations at NWTC. This is the first 2 in 4 different college courses that our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders are doing their first year. They take a 2-hour course on campus from NWTC instructors designed just for them. Throughout this year, they'll have those 4 different experiences in the health sciences, the College of Business, manufacturing, and trades. Each year, we hope to build on this. We're working on year 2 and 3 right now. Each of those colleges will look a little different from each other. In our health sciences, students will earn a credential from NWTC. They'll be able to take a piece of paper that measures what they can accomplish, what they've proven they can do, and they can take it to an employer starting their 2nd year. In the 3rd year, they'll be able to stack that credential on top of each other. So these are employability skills that they can take with them right now. In the College of Business, they've identified 9 standards that meet their criteria across their 4 different pathways. So when students get through their years with us, they'll be able to start that first year and have met the 9 standards for proficiency in their first course. In manufacturing, our kids are bending metals, welding, doing all sorts of things. Now, they can't earn a credential because they're not quite old enough, but right now we have students that are already measuring proficient at a college level in some of those activities. These are things they would not have had an opportunity to do had they not been to school with us. On the next page, I wanted to provide a picture of who our students were as a school when we started the school year. So that first graph is of our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders and our 12th grade school. On the second one, we break it down for our middle school and our 9th graders. Last year when we were in front of the board, one of the concerns was, what is our school going to look like? Who are the students going to be? And if you look at that information, we're a pretty close representation of what the district is currently. So through our recruitment and our marketing and our community engagement, we were able to help students find a place for them that mirrors what our school looks like as a district. When we look at our 12th grade program, you can see some discrepancies in there. You can see some certain groups that are a little more represented throughout there. And that's something that we are working through the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade program as we build to kind of alleviate some of those gaps that you can see throughout there. One of the large areas would be the English learner population. That's what the EL stands for. On the next page are our school success plans. What we see here is what the reality of our current school. Most of our students are coming in the lowest 25th percentile, and that's okay, that's where they're at. But when we said we want to get them to a really high standard, that's why we identified this 65%. 65% of our students will meet their individual scaled scores when the national average is below 50%. So we shot really high, and this is just year 1. Our objective is by year 5, 80% of all students will be meeting that individual scaled score so that we're closing those gaps and not maintaining what's already there. And you can see it's mirrored for the math as well, and probably a little worse off as we start. But this is who our students are. This is what we're starting with. On the last piece, number 3, one of our school success plans and one of our measurements for the DPI grant is our parent engagement, and it's at 80%. We wanted 80% of all parents or all families to participate in at least 2 activities. And right now we're already at 92% for our 7th through 9th grade and 75% of our 12th graders. So we feel that by the end of the year, we're going to have a much higher percentage of parents in our school more times than one. So this is restorative conferences, this is community agencies, this is just conversations. So we really are working hard to make sure our parents are in our school feeling comfortable, we're having those conversations, so we're not leaving anybody out. The next piece is just some data pieces. We looked at our students, what were their behavior like before they got to us, and you can see some data points there where behaviors have decreased significantly from last year to this year. We're also trying different things with our students, using more restorative, making sure we're having compassionate conversations with our students so they're not having some of these same behaviors return. Our attendance as a school, you can see there's some red flags there, 81% 7 through 9. But within that 81%, more than half our students are coming to school more than they were the previous year. So if we take some of our outliers who rarely come to school because of anxiety or depression, and we're working through those things, we're working with our community agencies, we have our social workers involved, we have the parents in our building. We're going to help close some of those gaps as well, but that's our reality. For our 12th grade program, 64%. But almost 60% of the students who are there are increasing more. And they're huge jumps too. I mean, when you have a student who's only attending 50% one year and goes to 80% the next year, that's a big jump. So there again, you take some of the outliers there and attendance would go overall. Our next step, we have continued collaboration with NWTC as a partner. So as we flesh out year 2, 3, and 4 and getting our students to start taking college classes while they're still enrolled with us. Professional learning. Our school spent a significant amount of time this summer working on cultural inclusiveness and trauma-informed care. What we want to do is go to that next level. What's that next piece? What does it look like, and how do we bring it into our schools and then provide it for everyone? Our expansion plan, just as we outlined before, we're going to add 10th grade next year and expand to 160 students in grades 7 through 10, in addition to our 100 students that we usually have in the academy at any one given time. We are piloting all online open enrollment process with the district, so students and parents can access us through any place on the web. We currently have 100 responses so far, and we're working with families to make sure that they have access to that if they don't have internet access at home.
Hello, I'm happy to be here this evening to provide an update for John Dewey Academy of Learning. We have 3 programs that we refer to in our school. The first is the high school project-based, middle school project-based, and the 6th through 12th grade online. And I wanted to provide a highlight for each of those programs. Our seniors work on a 3-credit capstone project. This is something that they work on throughout the year. They choose a topic that relates to a personal or a professional goal, and we encourage them to connect and give back to their community. And you can see on the report we have 6 seniors working on that this year. Some that you may be able to see if you visit us this Thursday for our event night from 5 to 7 p.m. is the dental health for the homeless. We have a student working with local homeless shelters and dental offices to ensure that the homeless population in Green Bay has access to dental care. We also have a student studying the school to prison pipeline, and she is creating a documentary following a former individual who was incarcerated and the events that led to that situation. You will also see, if you come to our event night, our middle school teams who are creating a underwater remotely operated vehicle. They are going to be participating in a local challenge where they need to navigate an underwater obstacle course and hope that they will be able to advance to the state and the national level. Also, last trimester, 89% of our online learners successfully completed their coursework. Moving into our statistics, you can see our enrollment. We are currently at 106 students. We have 20 students with an individualized education plan. And this year we added 6th and 7th grade students. So you can see we have 17 students in those areas, and then the numbers get a little bigger as we move up. For our school success plan goals, we decided that we wanted to make sure that every single one of our students was making at least 1 year's worth of growth. And you can see that in the area of reading, that 86% of our middle school project-based students are on track for meeting that goal, and 80% in each of our other programs. In the area of math, our high school project-based program has 92.5% of our students on track to meeting that goal, and we have work to do in the other three areas. And we also needed a parent engagement goal for our grant. Our goal was to have 90% family participation at our event nights, which are 4 times per year, and our student-led conferences 3 times per year. We have surpassed that goal for our student-led conferences in each of our programs, and we are very close to meeting that goal for event night participation in our high school project-based program. Next steps for John Dewey include continuing to refine our gradual release of responsibility model. Last year, we implemented a 4-phase system for our project-based students to provide them with more direction and structure as they begin their project-based journey. We also are exploring how we can provide reading intervention to our struggling readers. We also wish to implement more project-based learning in the areas of math so that our students can find more engagement and perhaps mimic their success in the other content areas. And our school, of course, was awarded the grant last year to expand our programming, so we've included 6th and 7th grade students, as well as now we wish to increase our enrollment. So the plan for us is to hopefully have 120 students in each of our 3 programs by year 5 of the grant.
Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to ask any questions, offer any comments? Christina.
Thanks for being here, you guys. It's great to hear the update. I have 2 questions around parent engagement. Can you talk a little bit about, you have goals for parent engagement, but how you see parent engagement being a key component to the success of your students and sort of the philosophy of your, schools that you're both operating. And then 2, I'm really impressed with the percentage of the parents that are attending these events and participating in just the schooling of their children. So can you give us a little bit of an overview of like what strategies you're using? Because it might be of value to some of our other schools that are struggling with parent engagement.
So at our school, we do our best to make sure that families understand that we're in this together and that we work on this as a team, and they know their student best. So we are constantly in communication with them and asking for their feedback and working together. So we invite them to our school not just for problem-solving sessions, but also to see all of the wonderful and positive things that their students are doing. For us, the big thing is communication. So I send a weekly newsletter, and I try to keep them updated using social media and help them understand that their voice is valued and that we want them at the table with us as we figure things out.
For us, I would mimic the teamwork mentality. And also, when we meet with our parents first time, there's a no judgment zone here. We're not here to criticize. We're here to be a part of the same team. And our biggest strategy we use, we have our own students invite their parents. So it's really hard for a parent to blow their own student off, but they'll blow me off anytime they want. So we provide scripts. We provide time for students to reach out to their own family members and make that. And we also go out of our way to make sure that we have evenings, mornings, and afternoon times available to them. We've also done Skype and Google Hangouts, whatever it takes. So just having that connection, knowing that we're willing to work with them. We've gone to parents' businesses to have those conferences because they can't, or we've come in on the weekends to make sure that we can be available.
Brenda.
These senior capstone projects look really interesting. Unfortunately, it's the week of our school board convention, and so 4 of us are going to be in Milwaukee. But do you have your event nights set for the rest of the year? Dates?
We do.
Okay.
The next one is April 2nd. And the 4th one I need to get back to you on that. I believe it's May 28th.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd really love to connect with these seniors with these projects and other students for that matter. sure there's a lot of interesting projects going on. I'm curious because I don't remember. What was your enrollment last year? Project-based and online. I'm wondering how this differs from last year.
Last year, our total enrollment was 64 students at this time.
Okay. And what do you, that's what I thought. So you've increased by a lot, which is great. And what do you attribute do you attribute that increase to anything? Or part of it is you added 6th and 7th grade, but that was only 17? Yeah.
I think the energy around the new building and rooming with a new school definitely helped. We also tried to just get the word out more using social media, and we also encourage our students to share the news that we had more openings with their friends.
Good. Yeah, I'm really glad to see the numbers up.
She's being humble right now.
Okay.
Jen
Fill
actually,
in the rest of the story.
Yeah. She put a lot of time and energy last year into reaching out to families that had left the district for online and letting them know that we have a full online opportunity, and was able to bring some students back.
And that number is higher, or is that number about the same as last year?
No, we have 35 online right now. I don't remember the exact number from last year, but it was more around 20.
Okay, all right.
Eric?
So my overall message is just to say thank you to the two of you for your leadership, or certainly the three of you for your leadership in providing different educational opportunities to kids who could benefit from it. Jason, thank you for reaching out and scheduling that interview or that tour last week. It was really impactful. So my overarching message is thank you for the work that you're doing. I also think about the numbers and seeing them go up. Largely that's our customers, right? It's a supply and demand, and when you have something that's in high demand, we need to be able to supply it. So my question to you is, can you talk to us a little bit about your current space and the pinch points, and as more families find out about this opportunity, what is going to be the limiting factor to telling kids, no, you can't go to JDOL or you can't go to the new School of Innovation, and how close are we to that?
We love the space and we love the location, most of all, being downtown, centrally located, but kind of all the public services. But in reality, we will be growing out of our space at the end of next year. I think next year is that pinch point for the amount of expansion we're planning. If you've seen the hallways and you've seen the space, having 160 students kind of go to a literal pinch point and kind of makes it difficult. So I think next year with the caps we've kind of set in place, will be that place.
I kind of thought of a question inside my question. So next year, you feel like that pitch point will sort of be the cap. Talk to me about the value a little bit more of being downtown and what that means to some of our families.
I can speak to that for our school. We are currently at capacity for our floor. We may be able to add more online students, but definitely not any more project-based learning students with the current space that we have and love. We also love being downtown, especially as our students venture out into the community and try to make those connections with area businesses and community organizations. That's something that's really important to our student body and to our families. But with our goal to expand, we too will need to rethink, what happens after next year. Jason and I have discussed how we can make it work for another year, but since both of us wish to expand opportunities for our students and more students in the Green Bay District, we will need a different space.
Dr. Langenfeld.
Thank you. First of all, this was a great update for us. I think about the combination of work, Jason, that you started this fall with, and all the investment with partnership with NWTC and the writing of the curriculum and the preparation with the staff, both at NWTC and your staff as well, around professional development, so it was age appropriate for the students. Can you speak a little bit more about what you see as needed moving forward around the instructional components of the work as you bring in more students and roll this up in terms of just resource and supports?
Well, like you said, we're building the curriculum from the ground up. Every course is uniquely designed for the students we have, trying to make that high level, high engagement piece. I think as we add staff, we add skill sets, but I think it's also using the partnership with the district and relying on some of that expertise that exists. And if it doesn't, then having the flexibility to go out and find out who does know this, who can we bring in, who can we team up with that can help us bring this mission forward, whether that continues to be TC or UWGB or some other partner as well.
As a follow-up to that, then, do you see additional, you said something else, another partner, a different partner you're thinking about, or you said another partner as well besides NWTC, or?
All right. There are people throughout the state that are interested in what we're doing. There are other places that are trying to kind of latch onto this idea of working with a technical college to bring some new things there. So there's been conversations with I want to say somewhere in the Fox Valley, I can't name the school from it, but a former employee that I worked with, they're working with their technical college to bring some of these opportunities with other schools. Our mentorship school, who's the Clark Street Community School in Madison, they've been at this for 7 years with a different component. So teaming with them to find out who are you working with, what is it that next piece, and then using some contacts even from the Baltimore area as well, because they have a whole different mindset and a different capacity.
Thank you for that, and Jen, both of you have done extraordinary work, and I know Renee has been a support to you in this process as well as Vicki, so I appreciate all of that. I know you have a big open house coming up. I saw a billboard as I was driving last night, so can you just tell everyone when that is so that people can come and see the extraordinary work you're doing?
The open house is Tuesday, the 28th. I normally have my calendar in front of me. So it is from 5 to 7. And we invite everyone to join us and come in and tour the facilities and speak with staff. John Dewey also plans on having students available to provide some specific tours and answer questions.
Christina.
Sorry, 2 quick questions. This one is for Vicki. So as we hear about the great work that's happening and the winning strategies and how we can like reimagine, right, creating inclusive learning environments for all kids, how is this information feeding up at the district level? And I know there's probably a very long-winded answer, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I can keep it short. They've actually invited district staff from other schools to participate in their professional learning and will continue to do so. Good question. It's not going to stop here.
Can you talk about your start time for your morning start? And I'm sure you know that we're having a conversation about shifting start times in our district. So I'm curious how that has maybe impacted your attendance and tardies.
Our start time is 8:45 a.m. and I don't have any data to compare to because it's always been that time for us. But I do know, just thinking of the number of students who come in tardy on a daily basis, we really don't have that many. If they do, it's because they're taking a class elsewhere at their neighborhood school first hour. So by starting at 8:45, it currently allows our students to take a traditional course if they so choose. Right now, that happens a lot for students interested in art, music, foreign language.
Oh, for us, it's 8:30s for our 7th through 9th grade and 9 o'clock for our 12th graders. And it helps with our tardiness and our attendance, but more so it allows our students to perform the duties they need to. So they're dropping off siblings at other schools. They're doing other things. So instead of missing 2 hours of school, they're missing 10 minutes. They're missing 15 minutes. We also make sure that first 30 minutes is a soft landing for them too. So when they come in, we can integrate them right into school. It's not a big production, so it's not as big a deal.
Laura.
Jason, as you know, I'm very excited about your new school, and we've had many conversations about that. But I really only have 2 questions. They're kind of big questions. First of all, what do you need from the board at this time? And what would you like the the school board to know most about the students that you're serving?
I'll take the second question first. They're our students. They're all of our students. They're the kids we see every day. We've got to love them. We've got to meet them where they're at. But we've got to get them to a place they need to be, which is a really high level, ready to graduate, ready to join this community and live here for the next 30 years. That's who our kids are. And they walk in and they've got their struggles like every other school, but we're working to make sure that we're meeting those needs, not in place of academics, but knowing that that social emotional component is on an equal playing field. Continued support. That's what we need. And ultimately, I think the investment in a full-time future facility is going to be the biggest thing. So if we're supposed to be at 450 students in 5 years, we need a space that's conducive to that. And also a space that is not a traditional school, that it's not just classrooms along the hallway. I don't think our environment would be very inviting if it was. I don't think we could do the things if we were doing that. So I think there is a substantial need for support going forward. And I think when we wrote the grant, we originally said we would have 150 7th through 9th graders year one. I'm very glad we capped it at 80 and then next year at 160, because I don't think it would be a very positive experience for our students if they were in that space right now. And again, I love the space. I love the location. So I couldn't be happier with that, but that's what we need most going forward.
I'm going to call on myself. So you mentioned public services being downtown. So can you talk more about that and why you feel that's an asset to the school community?
Our kids go to the public library weekly. Our students are connected with family services who's coming downtown. Our kids are reaching out to the different shelters. They're able to volunteer. They're using the community parks. So if there's a resource we can tap into, that's what we're attempting to do. Our school social worker is fantastic at that. Our counselor is trying to make sure that we have all these connections in place. And then the businesses downtown too as well have reached out to us and they welcomed us as well.
And if a family came to you or someone came to you and said, why should I choose this program versus traditional, what would be the maybe most succinct reason why you could, what would you tell them as far as why they should choose to come to your school?
I believe it's because we have the flexibility to meet their individual need. We can cater our curriculum, we can cater to their interests, we can carve time, and we can change things that aren't working. We don't have to wait long periods of time to make those changes. We're more agile in that manner.
And can you talk about, because I was there for a few hours last month, and so your dress code is a little bit more relaxed, right? Is that safe to say? You're allowing students to come in and wear hats, hoodies. They look like themselves when they're in the building. Can you talk about what difference and impact that makes in their experience during the day?
I don't think the dress code has much impact on our students because we're just letting them be themselves. So for the first week or two, they were very excited that no one's asking me to take my hood off or my hat off. But it's never been about the hat or the hood. It's about the behavior. So you can have the nicest kid in the world, wearing a hat. Great, he's a nice kid. You could have a kid who's being very difficult wearing a hood. It's not the hood. So if we can go at it from a relationship standpoint, go after the behavior, then the hat never mattered in the first place. So it's had very minimal impact. The coats, it just hasn't been a big deal for us because we haven't let it be a big deal. So there are certain things, we have our lines we don't cross too, but it really hasn't had an impact on our kids except for they're comfortable, they're excited. When Eric was there, there's a kid who makes these giant masks out of cardboard every day. That's his safety zone. That's what he wears. And he's fine until he pulls it over his face. And then that's where we have the conversation. And he's learned where that line is. So he can wear his whole bionic outfit now and he feels comfortable when he comes to school every day.
And can you touch one more time on, you made a comment related to looking at expanding and maybe not necessarily in a traditional school building. Can you elaborate on that?
When I think of school space, I think of a long hallway, classrooms on both sides. I don't see a lot of opportunity for intentional collaboration or even incidental collaboration. I don't see wide open spaces for students to meet and kind of come up with those great ideas or be inspired by someone.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
Or even staff for that matter. So all of our staff meets every morning in the same space. They're not in offices, not in classrooms. They end every day that same way. So if we were to have a space where that was their work area, so not only were they just having those meetings, they could be intentional about their collaboration, like a giant bullpen for that matter.
And my last question, what have you heard from, if you had to talk about the contrast, the difference between traditional and the program that is there right now, what have you heard from families and students themselves, just in the contrast? I know you shared some conversations in the beginning, but are they drawing the contrast between what they've experienced in the past and what they're doing right now? And how it impacts their learning?
I think if you looked at our students as individuals and looked at their individual stories about who's coming to school more often, they'd be able to tell you a story why they're coming to school. We're meeting something that they weren't getting before. And it's not that the school wasn't trying or making a great effort on it, but there's some piece, and it probably has to do with a human being. There's a human connection there. And it may not be an NEW staff member. It might be another student who feels comfortable enough to come to school. We have students that only come for that factor like every other school. So it's that human piece. So they're human first. We meet them there. It's that relationship piece that's driving it.
And I promise this is my last question. What is your average class size?
1 to 16.
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to share just how proud I am to work with these two, and there are many reasons why these schools are appealing to students, but I also want to recognize that a lot of students do have social and emotional needs, so I want to recognize our school social worker who came tonight, Anna Schneider. So I did want to recognize that. She has done a fabulous job with our students at both schools, so I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to have a financial overview presented by Pete Ross. Do you prefer Pete or Peter? Pete Ross.
As Pete comes to the table, if I could just share with you that Pete has done school finance and is one of the leaders in school finance in the state of Wisconsin and has been for many years. And I think as our new chief operations officer, we're very fortunate, Pete, to have you join us, to have this, not only this conversation, but to also work in partnership with all departments, especially on the operations side, to bring forward and the whole organization around the important issues that we are challenged with each day around school finance.
Thank you, Dr. Langenfeld. I am really happy to see the audience. I think there's people in the audience that have a passion for children that is equal or maybe surpasses mine, but probably none in the audience has a passion about school finance that I have. But anyways, an opportunity for all of us to learn. The presentation that you just had with respect to JDL and NEW, those programs can't happen without the board having an outward look at what's going on in the state in terms of the funding coming into the school district so that you can do the things that you would like to see done in the district so the people behind me can do the things that they want to do for kids. So it all does fit together, actually dovetails quite nicely. My goal tonight would be at the end of the session here that I will be sharing with you, it would be for you all to have a better understanding about school finance and the state support for public education in the state of Wisconsin and how that impacts Green Bay and the greater northeastern Wisconsin area. And so having said that, I think I'm going to dig right into the PowerPoint first. Now, my understanding is you have a PowerPoint that's been created into or turned into a PDF. So it won't look exactly like a PowerPoint, but that's the one that I'm going to do first, and Lori does have it booted up on the screen for you. For those of you that are going to the school board convention, I'll be presenting at 2 o'clock, I think, in room 103, A and B. Tony Kloboff and I presented last year and the year before and the year before that, I have been presenting with Bambi Stats, Director of Wisconsin School Finance for the DPI, as well as Dave Carlson, who was also Assistant State Superintendent for the Department of Public Instruction in charge of finance. So I've done this presentation for all the 15 or 16 of the past years. Of course, it changes every year because we add new data to it, but this is something that we've been talking about for a long time and we're very passionate about. In the year 2000, some individuals in the state and some organizations in the state took the state of Wisconsin to court with respect to the way school finance was handled. The court case has been known as Vincent v. Voigt, and for those of us in the room that have gone through administrative law classes, that's one of the landmark decisions in the state of Wisconsin with respect to school finance. And what we did when we initiated this lawsuit is we basically asked the state to examine the way they fund public education and come up with a methodology to determine whether what we're doing is creating a level playing field for all of our kids. The Supreme Court, while we were disappointed that they didn't revamp the entire funding system like we wished, but the Supreme Court did say that the state of Wisconsin has to pay particular attention to what I call the Vincent populations, but children of poverty, children of English language acquisition, and special needs children. So those three populations, the state Supreme Court told the lawmakers of Wisconsin that you've got to address schools that serve disproportionately large numbers of these populations through some type of extra aid. And thus, we have a system of categorical aid for reimbursing schools for costs associated with that. Unfortunately, since the lawsuit, we believe that that system has been underfunded. For example, our special education reimbursement aid, which was scheduled to be 26% this year, was established as some certain amount of money, and when that's divided among all of the schools in the state of Wisconsin serving special education children, the reimbursement rate actually ended up lowering to 24.5%. So we just last week received that information. I believe when we were last year at 25%, we were the 49th in the nation in terms of special ed reimbursement. So very likely we have not grown in that ranking, and we probably still remain 49th in the nation in terms of reimbursement for special education services at 24.5%. Go ahead.
Dr. Langenfeld.
And what is the transfer from the general revenues to that fund because they have not funded us at a higher percentage?
It'll be about a $900,000 impact to the budget where we'll have to transfer out of Fund 10 an additional $900,000, but the total transfer is in the neighborhood of $37 million to fill in for special ed services in the district.
And that's just to keep us with the status quo, just because of it decreasing. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. $900,000 impact.
But the $37 million also keeps the special education requirements that we're required to provide services, helps us be able to do that.
That's correct. Okay, the next slide has to do with poverty, and this is a pretty well-known slide. It's been around for a long time, and it's been updated by the DPI. In our report that we'll be giving on Wednesday, we have the most recent data in there, but the data hasn't changed at all. So poverty does impact achievement. High poverty, you have lower performance, and when you have schools that have no issue with free and reduced status, the performance of those students does improve. What I always say when we're talking about poverty, if you guys don't think money matters, and I say this to my colleagues who serve in other school districts, then give me yours. It does matter. Money really does matter. This is a basic model that shows how the state of Wisconsin supports K-12 education. There's really two main tenets. One is general aids, or equalization aid as I like to call it, and the other is the categorical aid that comes along with general aids as a result of the Vincent v. Voigt lawsuit. The other branch is the property tax levy credit, and the property tax levy credit is a way to get funding to school districts through property tax relief for homeowners. So the property tax levy credit, which now is about $1 billion, a B with a, a billion with a B, it goes to the property owner, not to the school. So it doesn't buy a pencil, doesn't buy a piece of paper, doesn't pay a teacher's salary, but yet it's still considered funding for schools. And it simply is property tax relief. Interestingly enough, so is equalization aid. What this school district depends on is equalization aid. That's property tax relief as well. What I like to say is property tax relief given in the form of equalization aid is Robin Hood effect. In other words, you take from the wealthy and distribute to those that need it. And the property tax levy credit is what I consider reverse Robin Hood effect, where you take from all of those that are paying into the system and distribute it more to the wealthy and the landed in Wisconsin. So it does the exact opposite of what the equalization aid formula does. Here's a historical graph next with respect to equalization aid, and I do have some history with school finance and the fact that going all the way back to 1993, we had a governor that came into the state, said we had to rein in school spending, that it was going, increasing at a very rapid rate. And so he established a method for school funding that really relied on three things. First, it relied on a qualified economic offer with the teachers. Now, since Act 10, the qualified economic offer doesn't exist anymore. The other thing that it relied on was a promise of 2/3 funding, that the state of Wisconsin would always support education in the state at a level of 2/3. Now, for a couple of years early in the 1990s, as you can see the equalization aid increasing quite rapidly at the beginning of your graph, the state did actually get to where it did fund public education at 2/3, not counting the property tax levy credit, but actually money that got to schools. And then the third thing that it guaranteed was an increase in revenue through a revenue cap limit that was geared to inflation. In other words, there was the promise that as inflation went up, so too would the levy cap authority for each school district. That lasted for about 3 or 4 years, and then as you can see, equalization aid in about the early 2000s, so 2002, 2003, if you take a line and just draw it straight across, in fact, if you take a line from 2008 school year and draw it straight across, there's been zero increase in equalization aid. Not inflation adjusted, real dollars, no increase in equalization aid. And as I go through the documents later on, not in the PowerPoint, but in the handout that you have in front of you, equalization aid is the lifeblood of this district. And basically for the last 15 years, there's been no increase in equalization aid. Massive increases, however, in the property tax levy credit. So are you in the levy credit, or did I skip one? Yeah, go to the levy credit and I'll go back to the heartbeat on the revenue limit. Okay, so the levy credit, here's a history at the same time frame of the levy credit. At the beginning, in 1993, the levy credit was distributed on an equalized basis. Well, it's no longer distributed on an equalized basis. It's distributed on a property wealth mechanism. The more you have, the more you get. And when I take a look at the growth in school funding across the state, the levy credit has increased dramatically. We're now at $940 million distributed in a non-equalized way. The more you have, the more you get. There is an additional $150 million that's distributed. That's why I say it's over $1 billion that's distributed in the first dollar credit. And that's distributed on a flat basis. Not equalized, but flat. So everybody gets the same amount on the first $70,000 of property valuation. We can go to the heartbeat graph now. This is a graph that I don't have in my PowerPoint presentation, but it was asked to be added. There's a couple other graphs that I added as well after meeting with the 2 school board members during the progress monitoring. They asked for more information. So this is the revenue limit over time. And what this graph shows is as the revenue limit goes year to year to year, you can see there was a slight increase to the revenue limit in the districts and the ability for the districts to raise revenue through aid and through the property levy that they assessed. At the beginning of this, back in 1993, it was geared to inflation. So there were revenue limit increases even as high as $230, $240 per student. Then all of a sudden, we run into some difficult economic times, and we reduced the increase in the revenue limit increase to about $125 a student. So we cut the increase in half. So no longer are we keeping up with inflation. Then 2 years later, there's a precipitous drop, and that coincides with the Act 10 legislation, where this district lost in its revenue capability $580 per child. And then as you can see, since then, the revenue limit increases haven't kept up. In fact, for 4 years, we were frozen at 0, no revenue limit increases. And in a couple of those years afterward, we were given about $75 to $100 per student revenue limit increases. Now, fortunately for public schools, the legislature did see fit to add per cap student aid. They're calling it categorical aid, but I question the categorical nature of it because it goes to every child in every district, no matter whether the districts are wealthy or not wealthy. Every district gets the same amount of money, and they're calling that aid to schools in the categorical nature. I would prefer that the money would go on the revenue limit, and then it would be base building, and that would be adjusted for inflation so that inflationary pressure could at least be met by the school board for programs that they have, rather than constantly falling behind. And I'll produce for you a lot of data that will show how over the last 10 years we haven't kept up with inflation. This is one of my favorite graphs because it really shows the distribution of the property tax levy credit and who gets it. So about half of the property tax levy credit goes to Wisconsin homeowners on their primary residence. So that's everybody that owns a house in the state of Wisconsin. If you take a look at your tax bill, you get a school levy credit. Now remember, it's not any money that comes to school, it's just simply property tax relief. We also have property tax relief for Wisconsin homeowners who have second homes. So there are some folks that'll have a cottage up north and they get the property tax relief on that as well. Then there's about 20%, 22% of other property in the state of Wisconsin that gets property tax that has the levy credit established to it as well. But the one that I struggle with the most is the category I'm going to explain now. $244 million last year went to people who are not residents of the state of Wisconsin. So these are people that live outside of Wisconsin, they own property in Wisconsin, and they too receive the property tax levy credit. So we collect income taxes and sales taxes from everybody in the state of Wisconsin in order to fund the property tax levy credit, and we ship $244 million out of state, primarily to Minnesota and to Illinois for people that own cottages that live in those states. And that doesn't get to our schools and barely gets into our economy because it's going out of state. That's every year. It's not just a one-time amount, that's every year. All right, school spending in the state of Wisconsin has been falling and falling below 2008 levels with respect to inflation-adjusted dollars. We're about 10% below what we spend today in inflation-adjusted dollars than what we spent back in 2008. Also, teacher salaries have fallen in comparison to inflation-adjusted dollars in the state of Wisconsin. If you take a look at the next graph, you'll see that we're about 4.2% below where we were in 2009-10 compared to now in inflation-adjusted dollars because we simply are not keeping up with inflation. We're not keeping up with inflation on school expenditures nor on salaries. And this is the kingpin, in my opinion. If you take a look at the general fund in the state of Wisconsin, very large fund, in 2003, 2004, public education was about 43% of that general fund, and predominantly in the form of property tax relief through equalization aid. And as you can see, I've put a line of best fit on the graph. It is a downward slope line of best fit. But if you ignore everything to the left of 2002, 2003 and start there, the downward slope is much more dramatic. So what this is saying is public education is not consuming as important a place in state budget as it did in 2002, 2003, and it's decreasing at a rather alarming rate. I work with an association. We do research primarily for grassroots information building and knowledge building in the state of Wisconsin, and the association is called Association for Equity and Funding, and we've done 3 studies over the course of the last 10 years, all involving the Vincent populations and school performance. And the culmination of the 3 studies really results in what we're calling the Disparity Index. So we've developed, with a lot of data sets from 2004 to the most recent data we've been able to mine, we've developed what we call a funding disparity. So in other words, if you're in a district that serves Vincent v. Voigt populations, students of disabilities, students of English language learning, and students of poverty, it's more costly for you to educate those children. And so what happens is, if you spend $1, the impact of the dollar that you spend is actually reduced by that disparity factor. So when you take a look at the first graph, that's a statewide disparity index using 2008, 2009 as the fixed year for inflation adjustment. And take a look at the blue line. That represents what's actually being spent. So let's say the blue line is at $11. It's $11,000, but let's just call it $11. What we're saying through the disparity factor is those schools on average that serve these populations have a real spending impact of about $10. So it's about a 10% reduction in the impact that dollar has on spending. We've got a graph for every single school district in the state of Wisconsin. So the next one is Green Bay's. And what this is saying, as you well know, Green Bay spends a little over $10,000 if you accumulate all of the things, all of the sources of money that you get, a little over $10,000 a student. What we're saying is the impact of that $10,000 spent per child is actually only about $8,000 because of the disparity factors. So in Green Bay, because of the population you're serving and the test scores that you have as a result of that, we have about a 25% reduction of the impact of the dollar that you're spending. So Green Bay is an urban school. Abbotsford is a rural school. So this phenomena exists not only in urban schools, but also in rural schools. And Abbotsford's spread and disparity, as you can see by this graph, is growing. One of the reasons that it's growing is the impact of Abbeyland meets in Abbotsford and the increase of English language learner population in that community. And then I also provided go ahead, Brenda, I'm sorry. Oh, Rhonda, okay. I guess.
When you say impact, can you describe a little bit more what you mean by that?
What I'm saying for Green Bay, for example, is if you had no disparity factor, in other words, your students did not line up with the Vincent population, the dollar that you spend would have $1 of impact. It would be truly $1 spent, $1 earned. In the case of Green Bay, because of the disparate populations that you have in comparison to the schools across the state, you have a reduction in the value of that money by about 23%. So your dollar spent is only giving you an impact of about 77 cents.
Because? the lift of that dollar is bigger.
Absolutely, right. So in other words, what we're trying to establish with us being involved in the Vincent v. Voigt lawsuit earlier, we're trying to establish a real dollar value to guide the state of Wisconsin in producing a mechanism that would better fund schools that serve those populations. So in other words, we believe the boost in Green Bay should be about 23 cents a kid extra in terms of what we're spending in order just to get us up to parity or to a level playing field. So when you take a look at Elmbrook, they don't have a disparate population. So when they spend $1, they get $1's worth of spending, and of course they're spending more than we are, so it even exacerbates itself. And with the numbers that are served in this district, that's actually for the school board a pretty important fact, because that's a lot of money, and the things that you could do with that money. Just think what you could do. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars.
I have a question about that. So who's having the conversation at the state level regarding that? Do you know if that's happening? Is there anything happening?
The Blue Ribbon Task Force was the clearinghouse for this type of information in the past couple of years, and I believe that the Blue Ribbon Task Force did a great job. And I think the tide is turning, and the members of the Blue Ribbon Task Force would have heard all of this information and have helped to soften some of the issues that we're trying to deal with. For example, one of the great things that came out of the Blue Ribbon Task Force was the promise to take our special education reimbursement from 25% to 26%, and then next year to 30%. The problem is rather than a sum sufficient amount of money to do that, they just threw a some certain amount of money at the problem, and it wasn't enough. So there wasn't enough clear thinking on how to handle that. But I think the word is out there, and I do see the tide turning in a more positive direction for us and for schools like Green Bay.
Dr. Langenfeld.
If I could add to that, I think one of the important conversations that continues that we are engaging in, and I know Pete's presenting down in Milwaukee, I'll be presenting down in Milwaukee, but I'm also meeting with the largest 5 school districts because we all are looking at a similar concern. We all are looking at high need students through the Vincent v. Voigt and reimbursement rate, for example, for EL students at 8%. So we start looking at those disparities, and this particular study is one of several out there that I know that AEF has brought forward, and I think that this continues that conversation to leverage a stronger voice at the state level for all students. If we care about each student in the state of Wisconsin, we need to do something different than we've been doing, and that was part of the Blue Ribbon Commission, but we have a lot more work to do.
Brenda.
And also, I would say the School Board Association has been working on that with, in fact, our resolution that went forward for EL funding is being considered at the Delegate Assembly on Wednesday. And is there another one in that? But that were transportation, increased transportation dollars, EL, mental health, yes. So that'll then be what if those all go through, then the School Board Association lobbyists will be lobbying for that, and they've been lobbying for increased funding since I've been on the board, so as have we all.
As things look right now, I would expect that they would, but it's hard to say until they go through the whole process.
Right.
Any other questions? Comments?
No.
A little bit more? Oh, it was so quiet. Like it was, end scene.
I could actually talk about this for hours, but I'm going to try to get this drawn up.
Right.
So I did put a slide in there because I do believe the responsibility of community members and school boards across the state of Wisconsin is they have kind of an outward focus with respect to this. Obviously, we need the money internally to spend, and you guys will develop the programs, and the administrators in the district are extremely capable and confident to carry out those recommendations. But what can we do? So there's a bulleted list in there, but I also included more of a, what are the facts, so that when you go to Madison or when you go to Milwaukee or when you meet with other school board members, this is something that I think you can repeat to each other. And I think go to the next slide. Oh, I got the voucher stuff in there. I think I may skip that and we'll talk about vouchers on another day. Yeah, that's the one. So state support of public education is not keeping up with inflation. I've got some real good data. Everybody in the audience that picked up the colorful sheets that were out in the hallway will have that data as well. But that's important for everybody to recognize is we wish there was an inflation adjustment factor for public education. It simply does not exist, and we are not keeping up with inflation. Districts that serve larger Vincent populations need additional state support. That's what categorical aids are supposed to do. Green Bay Public District schools puts a higher percentage of costs into the classroom than the average. I've got some data that will show that as well. And the district is more dependent on state aid than the average district. I've got that in other graphs as well. Please share these facts about our schools with friends, neighbors, and elected officials. Interesting thing about public school funding is the equalization aid formula was developed to get money to the districts that need it the most, property poor districts. That's also a great economic generator of other economic activity in the area. And interestingly, many schools in Northeast Wisconsin would benefit from increases in the equalization aid, not just Green Bay. And what a great driver that would be for Northeast Wisconsin. Okay, I'm going to have you refer to the handouts now because I want to give you a quick and easy data fact sheet that you can carry with you and put in your pocket and have to talk with legislators.
It's what we have on, it's on our agenda manager, right? It's the same one? Okay. Yeah.
I think there's more out there.
Yeah, but I can just copy it if I need it at home.
Anybody in the audience that wants to pick one up, take it home. Talk to your lawmakers. Show it to your friends. Okay. Green Bay schools at a glance. I think this is a really nice fact sheet for school board members to have in their pocket so that they can, when they go to conferences or when they're meeting and interfacing with other school board members, they have it. But what I want to show you is that Green Bay School District does have large Vincent populations. And I know from the compassion and the passion that I've heard the school board talk about these populations, you guys want to serve them to your best of your ability. Well, when you have 22% of your population, a little more than that is needing special services, and you're getting reimbursed at 24.5%, it makes it really hard. Because then you have to take Fund 10 money to supplement that, to supplement those services going to special education. So a 24% or 25% reimbursement for special education services is unconscionable, and that's a quarter of your population. Also, the categorical aid coming to schools that serve a disproportionately large population of poverty is pathetically small, and you have a huge population of children living in poverty at 60%. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you on the front page here is that state aid is your primary source of lifeblood in this district at 67%. So when state aid is not keeping up with inflation, it puts more and more pressure on schools like Green Bay and schools of similar characteristics. The back side of the paper is a comparison where we try as best as we can to compare apples to apples across districts on average across the state of Wisconsin. And the DPIA has a website where all this information is out there. I mean, we just plain and simple just took it right from the DPI website. So the 2017-18 comparable cost for Green Bay at $13,360. And then you have comparative revenue at $14,051. The point that I'm trying to make is, depending upon who you talk to and how it's calculated, those costs can change. Could be shared costs, could be named something else. Other people will take these numbers and distort them in certain ways. What I'm saying is that the comparative cost is done the same with all of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin, so you can compare to each other. And the comparative revenue is done the same way with all of the schools in the district or in the state, so that they can be compared. One of the big things that often gets factored out is how you pay off your long-term debt obligation. Some districts don't have any debt obligations, so if you use comparative cost analysis and included that in your analysis, your numbers might be more distorted because some districts are paying off large amounts of long-term debt. Other districts aren't paying off any. So we have a set of data. We're trying to do the best we can to make sure that there's comparison across the state of Wisconsin. But when you take a look at Green Bay, it's a nice comparison because it shows the board is putting money in the classroom and putting money in direct instruction. So when I take a look at Green Bay, you've got 56%, a little bit higher than that, goes as direct instruction, and 11.1% in terms of special education instruction. So about 70% goes directly to kids in the classroom for classroom instruction. And when you take a look at the state average, it's 53.6 and 9.5 for those same two categories. So when you compare Green Bay to the state average, it's a district that puts more money in the classroom than on the average. And when you take a look at the revenue, and I think that right now, in terms of the conversation I've had with you tonight, is probably more important. State revenue for Green Bay is coming in at almost 60%. Now, the reason that there's a little difference between the state aid coming and this number is because you've got property tax figured in there, which isn't a state revenue source. You also have federal revenue, and then you have local non-property tax revenue that kind of convolutes it a little bit, but they take each district and compare it to all the other districts using the same set of data. So a typical school district in the state of Wisconsin would receive less than 50% of state aid, where this district is receiving almost 60%. It's a pretty big swing. So when the state's not supporting public education, keeping up with inflation, that has a big impact on the district. And that's what this graph really shows here. I've got 3 graphs, and I'm just taking the last 10 years because I wanted to ferret out the influence or the negative impact of Act 10 and just show what's happened past Act 10, really basically for the last 10 years. So I used 2010 dollars and said, okay, $1 in 2010 is $1 is $1 is $1. Then the red line represents inflation. So for the first year, Green Bay Public Schools revenue limit was allowed to grow with inflation. But after that, as you can see, the revenue limit was not allowed to have any inflationary impact. And for those of you that understand calculus, it's not just the distance between 2 points on the graph, but it's the area under the curve. So it's cumulative. I see this young man nodding his head. It's cumulative. So every year that impact is added on and added on and added on. And so those are dollars lost to this district in its ability to serve children with those dollars. State revenue limit versus inflation, remarkably, is very similar to Green Bay Public Schools. It's almost exactly the same thing, and that makes sense because the state legislature controls, since 1993, every dollar that you spend, they decide how much you can spend. All right, let me rephrase that. The state legislature in each biennial budget determines your levy limit. Okay, that's important because there's been a lot of talk about schools spending a lot of money. Well, the fact is you're not keeping up with inflation, and the fact also is the state controls what you can spend. The big one, though, that's most problematic, I believe, in the long run for the Green Bay School District is state aid versus inflation. So when you take a look at that bottom graph, it's very obvious that equalization aid is not keeping up with inflation. And again, for our calculus students, it's the area under the curve. And so when you combine all of those missed opportunities to keep up with inflation, it ends up being one slug of a lot of money.
Any questions? Okay, Laura, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. On the sheet that you have about comparative costs, the state average for district spending on administration is 7.7%. Our district is spending at 6.9%. Am I reading that correctly?
That's what the data shows. And again, these are data derived from annual reports of school districts across the state where the state put a great emphasis on trying to make sure that they're comparing apples to apples so that we could make these comparisons. So the state is doing as good a job as humanly possible to make sure that those are the same data figures using annual report data that's been audited by our.
So this is from DPI. Yes.
This is not Pete. Yeah, this is DPI stuff here. Mm-hmm.
So this hasn't been put through any kind of political filter or these are just facts.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Thanks, Pete.
Eric.
Pete, I can't tell you how thankful I am that we have you here in our district. Clearly, you're very knowledgeable about all this, and I love your excitement, despite my lack of excitement. But I want to know, I want to know more about this. I want to get better. I'll be at your session on Thursday or Wednesday, whichever day. I'll figure it out. But I will be there and hopefully learn a little bit more than I did tonight. But I'm wondering if either you and I personally, or if we can do this more often in smaller bites. Because I understand why you wanted to cover lots, but if we could take this in smaller chunks just to help me, because I've had conversations with elected officials, and I've had conversations, and they tell me, no, we're doing better. The money's coming. You have the resources, and I don't believe that's true, but I don't have this to be able to tell them, and so this is a great start, and I'd love to continue to utilize you as a resource. For me personally, I think for our entire school board so that we can do more and do better. So thank you.
Brenda.
And this is what I think, but I want to make sure that levy credit, that the legislators package that up into education funding when they report out the total amount they're spending on education. Is that correct? No, you don't actually. I'm live all the time.
Okay, good. All right.
No one can cut me off.
Yeah. All right. Yes.
Okay.
Let me try to give you large, big picture numbers that you can easily grasp with not lots of decimal points. Okay. So about 10 billion, it's close to 11 billion, is spent on public education every year. About half of that, a little less than half of that, comes from the state of Wisconsin. Included in the half that's the state's commitment is the $1 billion a year that's property tax levy credit. So about 10% of everything that's spent in the state of Wisconsin is the levy credit, and that doesn't pay for a book, a pencil, a teacher salary, nothing.
It
So
just passes through our.
it's property tax relief.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And I believe that concludes this report.
Thank you, Pete.
See you on Wednesday.
I will be there. You'll get the full line.
All right, you're done? Yep.
I said it concluded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I missed the announcement.
It's a wrap.
All right. Next, we have our superintendent update, and I'll turn that over to Dr. Langenfeld.
Thank you. I'm going to begin with the calendar. We have the Wisconsin Association School Board Convention coming up. It's mentioned a couple times, January 22nd through the 24th. And on January 27th, there's a special board meeting in closed session. The board will be conducting superintendent interviews from 5 o'clock until 8. On January 28th, another special board meeting in closed session, again, superintendent interviews from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that'll take place here at the district office. January 30th, special board meeting from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, district office building. And on February 3rd, teaching and learning work session at 6. Here again at the district office, and followed immediately by the organizational support work session meeting. February 4th is a tentative special board meeting, closed session, another follow-up for superintendent interviews from 4 to 8 here at the district office. February 17th is our regular board meeting at 6 p.m. February 18th, 19th, and 20th, tentative special board meeting, again, closed session for superintendent interviews. And that begins at 6 o'clock, location to be determined. February 26th is a special board meeting from 5 to 8 here in room 331. And the 27th, February, is the ICSC meeting with the board at 7:30 a.m. here again at the district office. And then February 27th is also a special board meeting from 9 o'clock until 2 p.m. So again, all of these will be posted so that if anyone wants to take a closer look, that should be posted on our website. So that's the first, the calendar. The next item I have, we have some guests here from the police department who are going to talk to us about lethal force guidelines, and I'd like to invite Vicki Beyer and Chief Smith and Lieutenant Gearing and our guest to talk to us. These are questions that the board had posed earlier and asked for this conversation. So here we are.
Thank you, Dr. Langenfeld. As you'd mentioned, there was a request from a board member to discuss lethal force.
Sorry, did I take that away from you?
Thanks, Chief. Lethal force in schools, so we've asked the professionals to join us and respond to board members' questions. So, Chief, if you could introduce your team, please.
You bet. Well, good evening, board members, Superintendent Langenfeld and President Warren. I'm Chief Andrew Smith, Chief of the Green Bay Police Department. I've been Chief of Police here for just about 4 years. I've been a police officer for 32 years. With me is Lieutenant Keith Gearing. Keith Gearing is an 18-year police veteran. He's currently assigned to the detective section, and he's in charge of our school resource officer program. He's also the commander of our SWAT team. To my left is Officer John Najedlo. John Najedlo is also an 18-year member. He's currently works in our training, doing a bunch of different special training. But I brought him here because of his expertise in use of force. He teaches use of force to the new recruits at the academy at NWTC. So he's very knowledgeable about this, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer any questions you might have.
So with that, we turn it over to the board for questions. Rhonda?
I had actually asked a couple times for some, I guess, answers and to some guidelines about what SROs are doing in schools when there's an imminent threat that they're faced with. And what prompted me to think about this was the Oshkosh West situation with regards to the student who attacked the SRO and then the SRO shot the student. And I was curious to what's the protocol in place and how do you determine when you're going to use a gun versus a taser, or however that looks to you when you're in schools in Green Bay?
Turn it over to Officer Najedlo. But the use of force guidelines that we have are the same whether an officer's in a school situation, or whether they're on the street, or whether they're in someone else's house. And I'll let Officer Najedlo explain that a little bit further.
Thank you for having me here today. I think the answer to your question is it depends, and it's not a poo-poo answer. What it means is that the scenario in our training, the scenario dictates everything, And so an example I would give you would be, say you're the officer, right? And I'm a bad guy, and I push you, right? We're at a park, I just shove you one time in the chest. Could you take that gun out and shoot me? In your opinion, if I was to push you, you're a uniformed officer, and I push you, would you be able to take out your gun and shoot me? The answer would,
No, go ahead. You can go ahead and finish.
I'm assuming the answer would be no, correct? Yes. Now we change the scenario to now a street where you're talking to me, you're the officer on a traffic stop, and I try to push you into the roadway. Same action, different scenario. So then, could you possibly use lethal force at that point? Depends on the road, the time of day, the time of night, how heavy is the traffic, all right? And then now you take that scenario to the Leo Frigo Bridge. You're trying to talk somebody off the bridge, you're on the span, which officers have gone up there with a greater degree of frequency, unfortunately. And so in that scenario, same action, I'm the bad guy, try to push you over the bridge, and you would be authorized to use deadly force. That would be because no other means could exist potentially, right? So that's why I say the scenario depends. So it depends the size of the officer, it depends on the officer's experience, it depends on the positioning of the suspect, what type of threat they are, the age and the experience, and it's all kind of cumulative. So it depends on who the officer is, depends on the type of weapon. If there is a weapon, sometimes they're not. So it really kind of depends on what that scenario is. So in the Oshkosh incident, the officer actually said he tried to grab his taser but couldn't. And because he couldn't grab the taser, he's getting a barbecue fork put into his neck multiple times. And so he has a firearm accessible to him, and he uses it. And I don't think that would be any different than, because he's a person, it would be the same response that any of us would have if your life is threatened imminently, like about to, and imminent means immediate, like it's happening. There's no, can't phone a friend, can't call a timeout. I mean, it is happening. And so anybody would do whatever they could to try to save their own life. Does that kind of give you conceptually the idea of what an SRO may or may not have to do, when they can use a gun, when they could use a taser? I'm asking, I don't.
I would say it does in the context of what you described. What I'm wondering about is there anything in place where you absolutely have to be feeling, I mean, is there anything that's more, because we're in a school with students and kids, right? Is there anything that's more concrete as far as you absolutely do not do this, this is where you first go to? Can you just walk us through that? Because this is not something that we deal with every day.
Sure, no, absolutely, and that's a great question. But it kind of goes back to, like, it depends. What's the scenario? And I don't like to use that, but that's really the answer, because it all depends on what is given to us. So if a child, for instance, I've been to Chance for Change, and the child was screaming and yelling and threatening people and using every swear word and threatening me, and we didn't tase him, didn't spray him, didn't do anything. Talked to him. We had to put him into handcuffs, and I remember that because that was my first time ever doing that with on day shift, because I was a night shift officer for 10 years, so we dealt with a different clientele. But we picked him up, and I brought him out to the squad car, and I talked to him. And I calmed him down. We called his mom. We took him to crisis, and that was it. At no time did I ever think about using a taser or pepper spray or my baton because of his size versus my size. Now, could that change if it was an 8th grader who was 5'10", 200 pounds, and the SRO is 5'5", 120? Possibly that could change the force that they have. There's nothing that ever says, like, you can never, ever, ever not do something. I guess on a traffic stop, if somebody refuses, or if somebody refuses to give you your driver's license, you can't hit them. I mean that would be an absolutely. And I'm not trying to make light of it, but the things we come across are so variably based that it's hard to say for certain without giving just like such a far answer of, we would never kick somebody in the face because they spit at us, or we would never tackle somebody because of X or Y. So I'm sorry I can't give you like a concrete answer.
So what I'm hearing you say is that,
Sorry.
that's okay, that there really isn't a huge line of differentiation between what is happening in the school versus out of the school. So there isn't a context of, I guess what I'm looking for is just to clarify if there's a difference between what is happening in our schools versus out of our schools. Are there any considerations taken in comparatively because of the fact that you're in a school with students and not at a traffic stop with adults?
Yes,
Okay.
there is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the interactions and the relationships built with the SRO and the students. And I think that's where a lot of things really are brought together. And so the things that may happen on the street with a uniformed officer who has no real connection to the student, those will be different inside the school because that SRO knows the background. That SRO knows where this person's coming from. That SRO has dealt with the family and the mom and the dad, or maybe the dad as a student, and now the student, and now the student is the dad, and so they're dealing with the children. They understand where they're coming from. So yes, in that context, absolutely, because it's like anything, whether you're a police officer or you work at Burger King or wherever, it's all about the relationships that you build. And officers on the street build relationships with people. So we've said, hey, I've been to that same call or I've been to that apartment before, I'll take it. Because I would handle that differently than an officer who is not vested in that place. So same with the SROs, they're vested in the school with the students, so they know more intimately what the student is coming from versus just an officer who shows up and says, hey, here's just another call. And not to minimize what the officers are doing, but they're busy like everybody else, and they got call to call, where the SRO can take the time, and he would not do things that maybe a uniformed officer might, that has no connection to the student.
If I could jump in for 1 second, when we review these use of force, and we get use of force not involving schools, but in general, 1 or 2 a week on the Green Bay Police Department, we review all of them. I send them they're all written up and they're all identified, the force that's used. And the criteria we look at is, are they objectively reasonable? Did it make sense what this officer did based on the totality of the circumstances? And there's a million different circumstances, as you can imagine, that we see all the time. But that objectively reasonable comes from case law, and that's what guides the police departments as to what kind of force that they're allowed to use in any given situation. We always have a reverence for life. We always try and de-escalate if that's possible. We try and de-escalate the situation verbally. Sometimes it's just not possible because it unfolds so quickly. For instance, if somebody's stabbing you in the neck with a barbecue fork, as was described a few moments ago, your ability to try and de-escalate that by talking to the person is minimized. Most of the time we have an opportunity, and most of the time police encounters don't result in use of force. Maybe 1% of the time does a police officer in an encounter engage in use of force.
And I have one last question. When would you actually use handcuffs on a student? What would they have to do? What's the threshold they'd have to cross?
Well, I think the threshold depends, again, on the size of the student versus the size of the officer and the actions that are posed by the student at that time. So if a student, for instance, the one that I had to handcuff, he was flailing around, kicking, swearing, just out of control in the sense of they had to evacuate they took all the kids out of the classroom, they closed the door, and he's kicking desks, throwing things, destroying property. We're gonna have to put handcuffs on him. Now because the way to stop him from doing that is to stop, and plus it stops him from hurting himself, and that also keeps us safe. That keeps the student himself safe, and that keeps the other people safe as well. But officers have been, just because handcuffs are on does not mean that the person is or is less dangerous. Officers have been assaulted. Officers have been killed by people with handcuffs. Again, We're talking about some adults, but there are kids who are way bigger than me, that are 16 years old. And they're stronger, and they're faster. And so when it comes to the handcuffs, that's one reason. If he's threatening to hurt himself, and there's implication he has a weapon, of course we're gonna put handcuffs on him, and so we can search him and find that weapon, if there is one. And if there's not one, then we can take the handcuffs off. Handcuffs don't mean arrest. That's not what it means, always. Sometimes it is, but we detain them, and it's for our safety and for their safety as well. And for the safety of the children and anybody around.
I think we've all been disturbed by images we've seen where a police officer handcuffs a very, very small or very, very young individual, and we train our officers to avoid anything like that if that's possible. So what you don't want to see is a very early school student who's out of control that has handcuffs put on him. And I think our officers, and I trust our officers because they've shown me that they use common sense in situations like that. And if they can control someone that small and get them calmed down or get them so that they're safe and they're not going to harm anybody else without putting a handcuffs, they would certainly do that.
And I appreciate that answer quite a bit. Thank you.
Christina?
Vicki, this is for you. Do we provide any, and maybe I should know this because I'm a parent, do we provide any information to parents about the role the SROs play and like some of the considerations for things like being handcuffed or relationships with SROs? Like, is that built into the handbook?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. It's actually written on my whiteboard to check on that, and I haven't. So I'm sorry. I'll have to get back to you.
No, that's okay, and I think that would be something we could talk more about because I think that's an important piece too, is so the community understands what the expectations are. I think when we have a clear expectation of what, from a parent perspective, what the role is of the SRO and of police in our community is with our students, we can better advocate and elevate when we have concerns, and we kind of have a better baseline of standard. So that would be, I think, really helpful for us as a community. I don't know how we'd go about that, but that's just something I would consider.
And this question is for Chief Smith. What is your commitment to professional development for your officers around racial bias and unconscious bias?
Well, first of all, we start before they even become police officers, and we weed out anybody that has exhibited in their past any kind of bias towards anyone. That's basically a deal breaker for us. If someone demonstrates that they, in their past jobs, and we always ask their employers, we ask their friends, we ask their neighbors, we try and weed out those people at the very beginning. They receive training on that in the academy. We continually monitor that while they're on the job. Recently, we had nationwide experts that were flown out here, paid for by the Police Foundation, to come and provide implicit bias and constitutional policing training to our officers and to officers from surrounding agencies as far as Racine came and got that training. That was a one-time, one deal last year that we did, but it's something that we discuss regularly in roll calls, we discuss regularly in-service training. So our commitment is to, as close and as much as possible, police the city of Green Bay constitutionally and eliminate any biases. Recognize that police officers, just like everybody else, pick up implicit bias, but we've provided training to the supervisors and to the officers how to recognize that and how to police constitutionally.
Do you have a zero tolerance for that? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Zero. Certainly we have no tolerance for unconstitutional policing. We have no tolerance for racial bias of any kind. And that goes beyond racial bias. It could be ethnicity, could be gender, could be sexual orientation, anything along those lines. We recently formed a LGBTQ pride team, and that's a group of officers who volunteered to be a part of it. Their goal is to make sure that our community knows that we are open and inclusive, that our officers that we have, that are members of that community, know that we're supportive and accepting of them and whatever lifestyle they choose, and that to make sure that our officers have all the training so that they know how to deal with people in different communities. And that goes for all the communities that we have, from the Somali to the Hmong to the immigrant to the undocumented to the LGBTQ community.
I promise this is my last question. are you doing anything to attract and recruit a diverse workforce when it comes to your officers?
Well, I'm awfully glad you asked me that because I like to brag about our department every once in a while, and this is a great opportunity for me. We have 29 female officers on our department, which is way above the national average, which is about 10% out of 180 sworn officers right now. We openly recruit in all the different communities that we have, and I tell my officers I'm prepared to scour the earth to find the right candidate. We recently, a couple years ago now, we hired an officer from Jamaica. I can assure you he's the only Jamaican American police officer here, but he's a fantastic officer. And we found out about him because he was in the military overseas with one of our officers and living in Texas. And our officer said, you got to get a hold of this guy. He's an Army medic. He's great. We openly recruit at the LGBTQ festival over in Joannes Park, and then more recently over at the State Fairgrounds. And in fact, we were successful last year in recruiting a woman who was a police officer someplace else, but she was there at the Pride Festival. And in fact, you were there, weren't you? He's one of our recruiters that was at that festival. And talked to her and told her, hey, we got a great place here. We got a very accepting department, and I think very progressive when it comes to that. And she's now a police officer working afternoons here. In fact, she's working right now.
Eric?
I think I know the answer, but just double check. I've gone through an active shooter training with Officer Engelbrett, and know that a lot of his training is taking from other experiences that have happened active shooter. So would we do similar things with our SROs in terms of something happened in Oshkosh, something that happened in other schools, and using those as learning opportunities for our SROs? Does that happen?
Officer DeGello spent about the past year making sure that our officers were up to speed and trained on this, so I'm going to turn it over to him because this is right in his wheelhouse.
Well, yes, we do. We look at incidents that happen both locally and nationally. If we look at that and say, hey, that has value, we try to replicate that, or at a minimum simulate it, but we try to replicate it and say, hey, what would you do? And so this past year, we've created active shooter programs. We specifically targeted the SROs more than the patrol officer because we know statistically that the SROs are going to be one of the first people to be in an active shooter. So that included even more extra training this year, 8 hours before the school year. We put them through more active shooter training, more than any patrol officer. And we took them, I think we were at East High. And so we took them and put them through medical training, tourniquets, quick clot, chest seal, decision-based training using simunition rounds or paint marking rounds, and we're able to give them options about when shoot, no shoot, things of that nature. And those are decisions those are from different cases. About going in, we talked about from Parkland where the SRO did nothing versus going in, and that concept has changed from waiting for a 4-person or 5-person team to go in to now we go in as a solo officer, whether or not your backup is 15 seconds out or not, because that 15 seconds can be in the difference between you bleeding out potentially or another child bleeding out and saving that life and stopping the shooter. So we've taken those national incidents, applied them locally here, and then as we can, when the incidents like in Oshkosh or Waukesha happen, then we can replicate that at the department as well, and then see what kind of outcomes they have, because it's going to be different for each officer.
Katie?
Just a technical question. Do the officers routinely carry a taser?
Yes. Not every officer carries a taser. The SROs carry tasers, but not every patrolman does, because one, we don't have the funds to outfit every single officer, but when the shift ends, they bring them in, and then the new ones get them, and all of our officers are certified in taser. The use of taser, just this in-service that we're doing, we're recertifying all of our officers. So a majority of the officers do carry tasers. I'd probably say, if I had to just take off the top of my head, about 85% of the officers carry tasers.
And would you say where they're wearing them is equally accessible to the gun?
It's actually a cross draw.
The gun is on the dominant side?
Yes, the gun is on their dominant side, and that taser came out after the BART shooting, the Bay Area Rapid Transit shooting. An officer had grabbed what he thought was his taser, ended up being a gun and having an accidental shooting. so we put it on the opposite side, so there's absolutely no way that an officer's gonna grab his gun because they're doing a cross draw, either a cross draw or a reaction side draw. So the taser's on the complete opposite side of the body.
Laura.
Thank you for coming today. Your SROs, can you share maybe some common themes that they share with you as far as what it's like to work with kids in these settings? What's it like to see some of the children who struggle? And then also maybe if you can share kind of any feedback you got from them regarding how they felt about what happened in Oshkosh. I mean, that must heighten their stress level quite a lot when they hear about something like that. So I guess what I'm basically asking you is like, what's it like to be an SRO, and what is the emotional impact on these people that do this work?
I'm going to let Lieutenant Gehring answer it since he supervises the SROs. I spent about an hour yesterday meeting with our newest SRO, who's AJ Walker. He was the guy that was working at lunchtimes at the schools, started developing relationships with kids, realized that he was a really good fit for this because he's happens to be an African-American guy, grew up in Chicago, and joined the police department, I think, for all the right reasons. He tested for and was selected for the SRO position. I think he's doing a great job by what everything I hear. And I think the thing that he's happiest about is to being able to develop those interpersonal relationships so that he gave an example of one kid who came up to him at the beginning of the year and said, I would never be a police officer. I'd never be a cop because I'm from Chicago and there's some BS cops down there. And his response was, you know what? That's why I became a cop, because I'm from Chicago and I know there's some BS cops down there. And his suggestion was, why don't you come on the inside and help change the culture from the inside as opposed to being on the outside and complaining about it. But that's just one little snapshot, that from one individual who I think is out there really making a difference, and really because he wants to be there. He's the right guy in the right spot, and he wants to make that connection. But I'll let Lieutenant Gehring answer that.
Thanks, Chief. I think you just answered it. Anyway, sorry. All of our SROs are in this position to build the relationships that they have with the students. I know that they're all vested. They're all they're all in when it comes to working with the kids and working within the schools, and they love what they're doing. When an incident happens so close to home, such as Oshkosh, it does get them thinking. One of the things that actually they did, they took it upon themselves. They wanted to do their own kind of debrief about that incident. And I believe, John, you were there for that, right? So it was more of a question and answer thing for them so they can mentally prepare themselves, again, for something that happened so close to home. So if something, God forbid, would happen like this in our school district, they would be able to act appropriately.
No more questions? Thank you very much. This was really interesting and helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. It was very informative. Appreciate it. The next item we have as we move forward is in regard to the independent hearing officer for expulsion, and Melissa Theo-Collar, our legal counsel, prepared for the Board of Education a document per the request of Board President Dr. Brenda Warren. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Warren.
All right. We've brought this up. I think this might be the third time over the course of the last probably 6 years or so. And I decided to bring it up again. Partly what prompted me to do that was our conversation we had about board salaries. And part of our conversation was, how can we make being a board member more appealing, more accessible to people who have children or demanding jobs and all of those kinds of things. And it occurred to me as I was talking to someone who was considering becoming a board member, one of the things I had to add on the list was, and we have expulsion hearings that come up periodically. The other thing that has been my concern, and when we've brought this up before, it hasn't, we've kind of said, well, we're not in that position yet, so let's just wait. But my concern was what happens when we get to the point where we have 4 board members that have inflexible job situations that they can't just schedule a 2-hour spot at the last minute to come to an expulsion hearing. Then we would not have enough people to hold the expulsion hearing. We're required by law to have it within a certain time frame, which adds the pressure to the scheduling. And I think I think if we were to go to a hearing officer, and I assume all of you have read the information about the hearing officer, Melissa's here to answer any questions if you have them, but if we were to go to a hearing officer, I think that would help us as a board not to have actually, it helps the people trying to schedule the expulsion hearing the most. It takes a very long time to schedule expulsion hearings with us, especially when we can't get 4 people, and then we keep going back, and there's multiple people involved and things like that. So the idea of the hearing officer is that that person would sit through the hearing as we do now, and listen to all of the evidence and testimony, and then make an advisory recommendation that would then be brought to the board. And we would have, they would come before us in closed session, and Melissa would review or would present a review of the case and the decision that was made, and the board would have to either approve the expulsion or could modify it in some way. So at the end, we would still have the authority, but we would be much more nimble in terms of our ability to schedule expulsion hearings. The other thing is that the legal requirements, which we've just shifted to this, are that even a student who's going to a manifestation or abeyance hearing, even if the group in our district is pretty sure that they won't go to expulsion, we are required to schedule that. So for those of you who've been scheduled and then unscheduled, that's the reason for that. And so I think even though we don't have huge numbers of expulsion hearings, we haven't had I shouldn't even say that out loud. But we've actually had more reentry hearings than we've had expulsion hearings so far this year. I lost my train of thought. But now we've doubled the number of times that we have to try to schedule board members, and then many of the times that it gets canceled once the abeyance or manifestation hearing has been conducted. So I'm just offering it up at this point for discussion and to see what people think. I think Melissa gave us a lot of detailed information about what it is and how other districts handle their hearing officers. Christina?
So could you walk me through the process of scheduling the actual meeting? And I think for me, that's one of the things that I'm interested in seeing if we can improve, because I know for me personally, I work a full-time job, and it is challenging for me to just take off at a random time for 2 hours in the middle of the day. But I do think for me, and I'm speaking for myself, if I knew ahead of time, if we said, okay, if we could say, we're going to try to do it on Wednesdays from 8 to 10, or we're going to do Fridays from 12. If there was some sort of blocked times that I could say, okay, in my schedule, I could sort of put a hold on those. And then that way I could sort of flex my time ahead of time. Does that make sense? Just thinking about if there's a process way, and I don't know if that's not possible because of the way that they're scheduled.
I mean, yeah, you probably can answer it better. I'm on Sandy and you are probably the best to answer that.
So the statute says that you can only be suspended for a maximum of 5 days. And then in order to extend that suspension beyond 5 days, the student has to be notified that they are being referred for expulsion. And that's why Brenda has said we need to get a date, because those notices have to go. So for a student who is a student identified as a student with a disability, the maximum time the student can be out is 10 days. For a student who is regular education, it can be 15 days. So it's not possible to say Wednesdays or Fridays because it's going to matter the day that the offense occurred, when the suspension occurred, and then days that school isn't in session don't count towards those 10 or 15 days. So that is going to change things a little bit too. In addition to that, we give parents the opportunity to be there for the hearing. So if we said 8 to 10 is the only time we're going to schedule expulsion hearings, we have families that work all different shifts and families that can and can't get off of work. And we would never want to restrict a parent's ability to be there as a representative for their student.
Thanks, Wilson. Sure, and I'm not suggesting that we restrict it by any means. I'm just I'm just thinking that if we as a board said, you know, the likelihood is there are these times where the majority of people are going to be able to be the most flexible within their work schedule, and then we may be able to try to schedule within that if families could come. And I'm not trying to make it more complicated for you. Again, I'm just speaking for myself. I just know that there are, like, mornings are easier for me, lunch is easier, or like at the end of the day, and I could come to those more, but I don't want to make it more complicated for everyone else. So I just wanted to share that.
Eric and then Rhonda.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I agree that I personally think it's a valuable experience, the few, whether it be reentry or expulsion hearings that I've been able to attend. However, I've started to see a negative impact on our families and our ability to schedule it. And regardless of the timeline, I wasn't even aware that there was a timeline. I just think about if I'm a family, we had one the other day where this parent was like, I want my kid to get reinstated. They've done the things they said we want to get them back in. And it's on the 7 of us because we can't find a time where 4 of us can get together and let that kid into the district. That's a terrible service to our families. And on the other end, if you're a parent of a child who's potentially going to be expelled and you think about you don't want to wait another day. I want someone tomorrow to come and meet with me, but the 7 of us are delayed. And so while I see that it's a valuable experience for us to be there, and perhaps there's a different scheduling thing, my schedule just varies so much. I don't think I could just keep like times blocked and then be reliable to make those times. Generally when we have Monday board meetings is when we've done them, and I've been able to extend that time. But my flexibility also could potentially decrease in the future, hopefully. So I just worry about it that way, that while, yes, I believe that it's valuable for us to be there and to be a part of that, we're doing a disservice to our families, whether it be to come in or to exit, by being at the whim of the 7 of our schedules and the flexibility. So
I do want to mention, though, that if we are allowed to attend the hearing, if you still are interested in seeing the hearing, you wouldn't be the,
that's true.
So board members, new board members that have never been to one would have the opportunity to see what they're like and things like that. Rhonda?
Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and just say that I believe personally that when we have scheduled or been asked to schedule meetings in the morning, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like those are more likely to be filled quicker than the time frame of 3:30 or 4. I feel like that's filled up quicker. I just think that's what I've experienced personally. I think obviously we're talking a lot about our own schedules, and we're talking a lot about the families, but I think what's also important to consider are the families, and with this potential change, what that would look like for families. Stated in the information, it says the board has the authority to approve, reverse, or modify the hearing officer or panel's order. Legal counsel would be charged with presenting the hearing officer's order to the Board of Education for the board's review. We would review it, the information contained within the proposed order. So again, we are still going to have to assimilate for that. And knowing our closed sessions are always filled with other things, I can see this potentially, especially with the timeliness of it, this potentially could be another meeting that we'd have to call in order to do this. I think I would feel confident saying that. A couple things that are important to note, if we were to do this, we would have the ability to reverse or even just weigh in on a situation, but no witnesses are called. It's stated right here. Similarly, there is no statutory right to provide further evidence to the school board when they review the expulsion order recommended by the hearing officer or panel. So it's just kind of, it feels gratuitous to me. It also states that administration is not required to notify the pupil or his or her parents of the date, time, or place of the school board meeting reviewing such order. The expelled student, or if the student is a minor, the student's parent or guardian may appeal the school board's decision to the state superintendent. I think we all know sitting here that there aren't a lot of people in this community in this situation that are empowered or capable of even continuing taking it that far.
And not to mention the state superintendent, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, is very limited by law and what they can do, correct? They can only say that your expulsion, they can't say expulsion was a ridiculous penalty here, we reject it. They can only overrule it for what?
The state superintendent can overrule an expulsion order for violations of the process or that the evidence didn't substantiate a violation of the rule. Can I just speak to the point about having to schedule another meeting? You would be required to review that the independent hearing officer's decision in 30 days. So, and like you said, we could do it in a closed session before or after the board meeting, but it is 30 days. So that does give you a little bit more leeway in the time of having to review the officer's decision.
Rhonda?
But to me, that's not due process for the family. I feel like that's not something that the family deserves to wait for. I've had a lot of people reach out to me. I actually posted the agenda, some of the topics I have. A lot of people reach out to me and say, you were elected to represent your community and you should do that. I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's important to understand that there is a human aspect to this. I'm sorry that our scheduling is not where it needs to be at this point. I think we might, before we go ahead and just remove ourselves from this task, I think we need to consider some changes to our scheduling, potentially, maybe a different way of thinking about that. I would also say there's a monetary aspect to this as well. And when we sit and we talk about school funding for 2 hours and we close schools and we do other things, we potentially refuse students coming to the district for services. I think we need to be really smart knowing that if we are going to change this process because of, we can't get our schedules together, I think maybe we just have to do a better job. The difference is we're going to spend money versus we're going to schedule ourselves in a better, more efficient way. I think we need to maybe do a little research on that and consider that.
And when you say schedule differently, what are you referring to? What would help you come to an expulsion hearing?
I would say if it's not at 3 p.m, or if it's not at 4 p.m, if you go back and you look at the expulsion hearings that we had last year, how many did we have? 16, 20? I attended almost every one of those. And those were almost always in the morning. So the evidence, facts show that people show up in the morning. They don't show up in the afternoon. And there has been a lot more scheduled, a lot more of the reentries are scheduled in the afternoon. So that potentially changes. I think we could actually come together and do that. If that's the problem we're trying to solve, I would ask us to consider maybe focusing on that time frame versus potentially manufacturing problems for our community.
Eric?
Sandy, could I call on you to tell me a little bit about what the process is? Because you're the one who schedules these. What is the process for someone comes to you and says, Sandy, we need to schedule an expulsion hearing?
Okay, what I usually do is we first have to find out the first day of the suspension and then back it up. You got 10 days, like Melissa said, for the special needs students, and then 15. And then I try to schedule it around where you're already here. That's usually what I try to do. If at all possible, I back it up to a board meeting so you're not missing another day.
Andrew?
I would I would prefer also to see what could we try with scheduling first. I think putting them in the afternoon absolutely is responsive to something that we have said as a board about scheduling, about trying to keep it on the same day, and what we've done with moving our closed session times and so forth. But if that's keeping it on the same day, coming at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, versus keeping it at the same day, coming at 2 o'clock, when there's a number of us who might have a number of us or prospective board members or people considering this, that is right in the middle of prime time for picking kids up and so forth. So I would like to see what where I'm not as completely opposed to a hearing officer as I once was, now that I understand that the board has a final say in every case. I would feel that to take that step, I would need to know that we've tried everything first, and scheduling, trying something different with scheduling, just picking a set day of the week that we might be able to sign up for, knowing it might not be needed, is a start. If a family can't do a morning, we have to do something else, then that's okay. If you said, I could certainly commit to signing up to enough of whatever that morning selection is, I think we could assure ourselves of having 4 or 5 members minimum scheduled each time. And I'd like to try that before we would go all the way with a hearing officer, because that takes it really takes a lot of the, I think you have a right to make the case to the elected officials as to why this shouldn't happen, or why something should be different, or the term of expulsion should be different.
Oh, geez.
I had my hand up way before they
Okay,
did,
all right.
so I'm just telling you that. Does it have to be all or none? Does it have to be exclusively a hearing officer? You can't?
Correct, that's the Madison decision that I sent you. Andrew had raised that question as to whether you could have a hybrid model. And once you pass that resolution for that school year only, because you must pass the resolution every year, for that school year only, it would be a hearing officer.
Laura?
And I understand, can I just?
Go ahead.
Rhonda has extra. I'm having an extra moment. That's okay.
An extra question.
An extra question. You do. I'm doing. No, you didn't say.
No.
No, I'm just saying you've been my role model. All right. Then I think it would behoove us as board members, because I know part of the issue is Sandy will send out a text to everybody to see who's available, and not everybody answers. So she doesn't get the feedback so that she can move forward with the scheduling. And you can't always count on, again, with the family situation, family availability, and the timing of the hearing, you can't count on just putting aside one morning a week or whatever that may or may not work.
Can I also add that those notices that you sent out have to be in their hands no less than 5 days prior to the hearing. So especially for students with disabilities, because you only have the 10 days and they've been out the 5 days for the suspension, and then you have the manifestation hearing. And then when you have the manifestation hearing, if it's not a manifestation, then you'll have the disciplinary hearing, with the due process hearing before it's sent to expulsion. We are really pushing it. And so then Chris has to deliver the expulsion notices, and we have families who are not home, and they have to be in their hands It cannot just be simply placed in the mail. So that poses a huge complication. So when you don't respond to Sandy, that then pushes us further down the road. And going back to Andrew's point, the state superintendent will overturn an expulsion if you have violated those day minimum requirements.
I think Christina and then Michelle and then Eric. Oh, did I miss? Oh, in my head, I called on you once and Katie took your, sorry, Laura.
I just have a couple questions. Have we ever had a hearing officer in this district?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And I don't know who can answer this question, but this is a fairly common thing throughout the state, right? To have this in place. Okay. So, first of all, Sandy's like a goddess of scheduling. I can only imagine how many hours every day you spend scheduling people. But it's not just her, it's not just the board members. It's your schedule, right? You've got a lot of stuff going on, and
Well, it's mine, the principal's, Claudia's, because Claudia presents the case, and Ellen's. So those are, but once Sandy, the important thing is the board, obviously. When she gets those, and she has checked to see if we are available, we do have to move things then to make sure that we're available for the hearing.
sometimes we have to have a translator as well, and we can't always determine how long these hearings are going to be. The translation aspect adds a great deal of time. We've been downstairs doing an expulsion when we should be up here starting a meeting, which is stressful, and I don't like to hurry through these procedures. They deserve the full weight of our consideration if we're going to be doing them. So that is uncomfortable, and there's just so many variables around all of these hearings. So I would like to explore this proposal further. I feel like, we could use some reassurance as to how this would actually play out. Let's see here. I think that's it.
Christina?
Thanks, Laura. I just want to go on record and say that I appreciate this conversation. I think there's things that we can be doing better. I'd like for us to explore those things further before we give further consideration to an independent hearing officer. I'm not in favor of that. And I say that recognizing that I personally can do a better job making sure, or we all can as well, like responding to your texts, being present, making sure that I'm blocking out time in my schedule, and I'm committed to doing that. So just wanted to go on record so that you know where I stand. I understand the concerns, but I do feel like that is a responsibility of our board to be there, and I am committed to that.
Michelle?
Thank you. I have the opportunity to watch all of these things and listen to these things being scheduled. And I would just ask that we have a clear understanding of who on the board is going to coordinate this and work with Sandy, so that when these special accommodations or opportunities to work with this, then a proposed schedule, if this is the route the board chooses to go. So that it isn't Sandy trying to figure all this out again, if this is the board's request.
She's not a mind reader.
Eric?
Yeah. She's good.
Yeah, I guess maybe if we, what I'm hearing, and I guess what I would agree with is if we can, we've told Sandy in the past, or the board has told Sandy in the past, to try to schedule them on days when we're already here to limit that. It sounds like we would like to maybe try to change that to demonstrate that we tried something else. Currently, that's not working for people. So if we, for the remainder of the year, do something else, if it's a doodle poll, or if the text message thing isn't working, if people are saying, nope, I'd rather come in the morning or on a different day, let's try that. If it doesn't get better for the remainder of this year, we're also losing Sandy here at some point. So we're going to have a brand new person who's in that role. And the learning curve is going to be very steep to fill those shoes. So I would say let's decide what that is, go the rest of the year, and then agree to address this again in June, and then take a look. And Sandy, I don't know when you're leaving us, but you can provide some feedback to say, hey, I've done it this way, and this is my experience. Yes, it has gotten better, or no, it's the same or worse. And then we have to sit down and think about the service that we're providing to our kids. But I agree that we should try something else to see if it works, and if not, but I'd like to put down a marker to say that we're going to discuss it again.
Brenda?
Yes.
Sorry. Can I just offer a minor suggestion? I appreciate all of it, and I appreciate the discussion, and I'm looking forward to someone working with Sandy and Ellen as to how it's going to look for scheduling, because it is very stressful. But I'm just wondering, as we monitor this, I appreciate to relook at this in June. If you look at the proposed timeline, so let's just say we've all put in our best effort and it doesn't work. And again, whatever happens, happens. We're going to be behind the 8 ball, though, because we need to seek requests for proposals. So I'm just wondering if we put in the best effort this year, in the meantime, no hurt, no loss of putting out the request for proposal sometime in the spring, so that we have that information if you were to need to move forward with the resolution in July. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That doesn't commit us to anything, right? I mean, it would be just more information that you could bring to us.
Then we'd have more concrete information of how much the cost would be and what the situation would look like, yeah. Rhonda? And, oh, sorry, Andrew, and then you're after Rhonda.
Noted in the information, it was $125 to $150 an hour typically.
That's just an unscientific. I threw out an email to our listserv in the State Attorney Association, and that's very unscientific as to what I got back. So I don't know that would be, and some attorneys may charge just on the hearing basis. I do know one attorney that does that. There's also retired school district administrators who serve in this capacity. So you're going to probably get a wide variety of proposals. So like Brenda said, the concrete information we don't have, that was as best information I could gather.
And, okay.
So just going back to last year, we had 20 expulsion hearings, 8 reentry meetings. I just seem to remember, because I attended a lot of those were in the morning. And I feel like it was much easier to accomplish that in the morning. I'm not sure we should have where we are choosing a set date. At that point, I think we should just consider maybe trying morning options first before we do that. I think that would be a better option, because just based on memory, we've had 3 expulsion hearings, one was canceled, and the 9 reentry meetings so far this year, this school year. I would also like to offer up, maybe we just try to do what we can to not expel kids, right? I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation that we're having around scheduling, and that's really we're hyper-focused on that, but we're kind of flippantly talking about expulsions, and maybe we have to do a better job about that aspect of it.
Well, we've had one.
Yep, well,
so I think
right.
that's,
so we
are improving.
Exactly, and
Yep.
in that, and thank you for saying that, because in that context then, again, I'm not sure what we're trying to find some sort of problem.
Well, we've had 9 reentries, which is great. We love
But
reentries.
the hearing officer would not preside over
Oh, so we
reentry.
still do
Nope,
those. Okay,
the statutory authority would not be for reentries.
Okay, all right. Andrew.
So there's probably things we should do that are more. Were you not done?
No, I'm done, that's fine.
Okay. There's probably things we could do more flexibly with reentries legally, correct? I mean,
We already do that. Yeah.
We first see when the family's available, and that's when the hearings have been scheduled and the family's been available.
But there's not a time requirement. to
There's not, but the
reentries.
longer we wait, as you
Yes.
know,
I'm not talking about the longer we wait. I'm talking about we could have a shorter. Well, that's a separate conversation, I guess, than the hearing officer. But I think while there's certain things that are ideal about reentry, there's things that are probably legal that I would give up some of the length of hearing and amount of conversation and stuff if we know that everything's been met that we already said at time of expulsion. I mean, those are good hearings to see where someone has, come through and have a chance to tell their story to the board about what's changed. And I get that, but I would never want to, if it came right down to it, I think we could probably find find a different way that we could get that done. Not wait longer, but do it faster. With regards to a set time for expulsion hearing, I guess one, and I don't know that it's a thing that probably would be hashed out well at the board table, but I think if we did something like, the reason I like a fixed date as a primary is, for example, with me, I would go through them for a whole year, and I would accept most of them for a whole year, knowing that most of them would be canceled. And if we got to the point where it wasn't getting canceled, then we've got a bigger thing going on. Also knowing that if the family says, nope, that Thursday morning 9 to 11 slot is not good, then we're not going to do it then. And then we go to the text message or something else. But a standard slot for me would allow me to book it out for a year, to tell my employer that on some Thursdays I will have an extra meeting. And then as the year went on and there were hopefully only a handful of them, it would just...
But
We would need a standard time on every day of the week, though,
Yeah.
based on the 10-day, 15-day, and then the 5-day notice requirement for the expulsion
And
notice.
how many, sorry, I'm gonna call myself quick, how many expulsions did we schedule that we then canceled this so far? Do you remember? Has it been like 5?
Probably.
I wanna say it's about 5, yeah. So that's added to this is the scheduling of expulsion hearings that don't happen. And that requires us to, if we accept that, we have to be available, because if in the handful of cases they actually go to expulsion, then if we've promised to be there, we have to be there. Go ahead, Christina, then I'm gonna jump in.
Can we kick this to a committee? I mean, is this organizational support? It seems like this should be a conversation that we have in a small group where we look at the data, we actually think about what data tells us we even need a hearing officer. It would be great to have an in-depth conversation with Sandy. We can come up with a recommendation. We can bring that back to the board and say, this is what we've gathered. This is what we suggest. Here's how we move forward, because us doing this at 8:45 at night, we're not going to be able to figure that out. But in a small committee, I would suggest that we can do that.
And would you like the request for proposal issued so that we have that information and data for that committee to consider? Would that help?
I think that would be great, because we could talk about that in committee and then bring that recommendation back to the board. That would be my suggestion.
I have a proposal to just move forward. I think if board members can, if we every time have to schedule an expulsion, we'll offer a morning and we'll offer an afternoon and see where it goes. And board members commit to answering all text messages when they come in as soon as possible. Because it's difficult when it's 24 hours later or never, which is in many cases it's been never. Agree to that. We'll put out 2 dates, and I mean 2 times, and it'll probably be on 2 different days too. But and just see where we get with that. I think too it's really important. There have been occasions where people have signed up to be at the expulsion hearing and haven't showed up. Sandy gets really nervous with that, because if 3 of the people that promised show up and not the 4th, we can't hold the expulsion hearing, and then we're gonna meet that deadline and not meet the requirement. So I think if we just try those steps and see how things go in the next couple months, I'm not sure we need to, at this point, I mean, if we can fix it with this, I don't think we need to have a committee. But are board members interested in having an RFP, or you want to wait, or?
I think that's worth
Okay.
It makes sense just to gather more information to make an informed decision.
Okay.
No harm, no foul. No.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think there's been enough clear. I think if there wasn't this clear conversation that we do want to try other things first, but at least know how much it would cost if we wanted to do it. I think if we just out of the blue next week without this discussion had a RFP going out, people would say, "Oh, it's in the bag. You're just going to pretend to try this year." But we've all said we're gonna try. I have some times when I couldn't when a time wasn't going to work for me, I maybe didn't reply after I saw that there were certain. So I will reply to all of them. I'll answer them all, even if it's no, and I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. The next item I have is school success, or I think that's what it is called under, success story. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday celebration, and on Saturday there was a large celebration at NWTC, which is a Brown County celebration, bringing our entire community together to celebrate and honor and recognize Dr. King and his work. I know Chief Smith was there. I know that representing our board was Laura McCoy. And it really was an important day. Many of our students were honored for their posters and their essays and the extraordinary work that they've done. I know that that they have been featured in the staff scoop as well. One of the things I did want to point out is the discussion that we had at, we do talk about disproportionality, we do talk about equity, we've done and had conversations, and I know that our multi-level systems of support, we take this very seriously. And so as we think about the work of Dr. King and the vision that he set out for us, it's envision change and act now. And I believe as we look at our data and the data that the People Support Services and Student Services has been working on in all of our schools and our administrators, is to really change that trajectory for each and every child that we serve, to make sure that they have equitable access and opportunity. And the work that we see in our schools and through the MLSS is reflecting that. So the conversation that we just had around expulsion is something that we continue to delve deeper in to make sure that we are treating every child with respect and fairness and access as well. The other piece I wanted to share that is a really exciting piece, I've got it over here. There was a gentleman in our community who did a lot for our community in terms of give back. He was a dear friend of the Green Bay Area Public Schools, served on our Fine Arts Board, a gentleman by the name of Jim Rivet that I know many of our community join us in missing as well. But one of the things that Jim always did is he brought forward a poster through his company, Chrome, to celebrate Dr. King. And now Elevate 97, in conjunction with Chrome, both under the same, and the CEO is Kate Burgess, came forward to us. This is the poster reflecting Dr. King's celebration. And it has a beautiful quote on it, and the quote says, "If you can't be a sun, be a star, for it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are." And Dr. King actually used this as part of a poem that he used as part of a speech with students, junior high students in Philadelphia in 1967. Now here's the wonderful part of this as well. Kate Burgess and her staff came and met with Lori Blakesley and myself and had a conversation about the possibility of having schools submit why they should have this in their schools. This will be a very large mural in one of our schools. There were 2 schools that came forward and applied for this opportunity. I know that the winner has been selected. It will be a huge installation in our schools. And both of our schools, both Nicolay and Sullivan, came forward with proposals. And I know that representatives from Elevate 97 came and looked and measured, and it will be a huge installation in celebration of the children and the school. So I know that that announcement will come to staff tomorrow morning, and so I don't want to get out ahead of it, but it will be a very large installation in one of our schools. I think it's absolutely stunning, and it's a wonderful tribute to Dr. King and also a recognition of Jim Rivet as well, and Kate Burgess and her organization. So that ends my part of this discussion tonight, so. And we'll let you know which school.
All right, we also have a superintendent update discussion item, public comment and action item, and I'll let you introduce that.
Yeah, this is, it is a contract that we've had underway since over the holidays with a change, and it is the lunchtime security contract, and that's as presented is what we're asking for, a motion for that to be approved.
I move that the lunchtime security contract as presented be approved.
Second.
Are there any questions? All right, Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. I'm thinking I'd like to call a break. We'll come back at 9. All right, I think we'll get started. Next on our agenda is our intercity student council report. I'll turn that over to Luke. Billy.
All right. Academic decathlon was January 10th, and the Green Bay schools did really well. East took first, Southwest took second, and Preble took third, which was phenomenal for us. Noah got first in the scholarship category. He didn't want me to say that. It was finals week, so all the students are kind of relieved now, except for East, who are in the middle of their second try. Show choirs in the swing of things, and Southwest got third for prep division just on Saturday at Milton, and Rendezvous, which is Preble's unisex group, got third in the unisex division, and then East hosted Shabango, which is a show choir event that they do, and East and Preble both participated in that. East got fourth overall at Parkview, which is a great achievement. DECA was on the 4th of January, and we are sending over 20 students to state as a district. At the Oshkosh West invite, Preble took first in kick for D1, and they took fourth in prom for dance. Chicago at Southwest is coming, and I'm going to shamelessly plug my own show. It's January 31st through February 8th, if anyone wants to come to see it.
And say it, I have the lead.
I am the leading male. Southwest National Honor Society hosted Trivia Till Dawn, which is an all-night trivia competition. And that was Saturday night. So I participated in that, and my team won, and that was very fun. J-Doll has their second event night on Wednesday from 5 to 7. Southwest had an event at one of their assemblies where they had 2 male students shave their heads, and we raised $650 for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And the weighted grades committee met for the first time on the 15th of January, which went really well, and I'm excited to see that move forward more.
All right, thank you, Luke.
Yeah.
A bunch of us will be there. All right, let's see. Next is legislative liaison report. I'll turn that over to Laura.
It just occurred to me that I didn't even put on the agenda of the fact that some of us are going down to Milwaukee, for the convention. So we got 3 items. The first one is just sort of an update about restoring the energy efficiency revenue limit exemption, which I don't know why I'm so fascinated with this, but it just seems like such a no-brainer for me that this would be restored since so many districts can benefit from it. So the restoration of this exemption would be a great benefit to districts all over the state, but the history is kind of colorful. It has to do with Republicans getting rid of this exemption due to concerns about potential increases in property taxes during the tenure of Governor Walker. Governor Walker vetoed it and made it impossible to access it again until the year 3018.
She said that right.
That's the correct number.
He did that, he could fix that number.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, our district benefited greatly from this exemption when it was in place. And we heard some of the, about some of the work that was done, how it helped some of the work that's been done last month when we were talking about sustainability. The bill is currently in the Senate Organization Committee where it may be scheduled for a floor vote. However, I lobbied Senator Coles at an event I was on Saturday with some of you, and he wasn't actually feeling very hopeful about it, so, which is unfortunate. Let's see here. That's SB 494. SB 423 has to do with lead contamination in drinking water. So Senator Coles also authored this bill which speaks to lead contamination in drinking water. So this is obviously a huge problem in districts across the state. So I am happy to share that when I spoke to Dr. Langenfeld about this, she informed me that the Green Bay District has already dealt with this issue in all of our schools. So I'm just sharing that good news to anybody who might, just be wondering about what's going on in our district about that, or what has gone on. And it's been that way for quite some time. So let's see here. All right, number 2 is a draft bill. It has a ways to go. Allowing virtual charter school students to participate in school athletics and extracurricular activities. So this proposed bill, it's being proposed by Republicans, Senator Petrowski and Representative Allen, would mandate that the WIAA require school districts to allow students who have chosen to attend a virtual school to still be able to participate in athletics and extracurricular activities. So currently, homeschooled students who reside in the district can participate in athletics and extracurriculars, and they're charged the usual fee to do that. I didn't really have time to research this more, but I would love to know approximately how many students in our district who are homeschool actually do participate in extracurriculars. You don't have to answer that, but I'm just curious. That'd be an interesting number to know. So the WASB and its member districts are opposed to this because they are generally against all mandates, both implicit and explicit, and they also support the autonomy of WIAA, which is a private entity. According to our administrator of district co-curricular programming, Tim Flood, there are 2 main reasons why the district shouldn't allow virtual school students to participate in activities at their home attendance school. Our district does not receive state aid for the virtual school student. And number 2, there would be very challenging logistical issues with keeping records for eligibility, such as academics, attendance, and behavior. So, number 3 on our agenda is school district boundaries appeal decision to deny the dissolution of Palmyra Eagle School District. So this is an interesting case of a school district on the edge of dissolution, only to be kind of pulled back from the brink by the School District Boundary Appeal Board, of which we have a member right here in our midst. It was a 6-1 vote, and the decision was made after quite a few public hearings. So this case has gotten a lot of attention statewide, and I think other districts have been watching this with great interest. I wanted to talk about it because while it is ostensibly about the dissolution of a school district, I think it's really about how we fund schools. now that a lot of schools have to go out for referendum funding every couple of years just to keep the lights on, it makes districts like Palmyra, Eagle vulnerable to the will of voters. And if you have a scenario where a community already has conflict regarding their public schools, which I think this one did have some already present, it can be hard to convince voters to reinvest in their schools. So I look at this as a school funding program problem, which has struck a particular school district, but in reality, I think it's relevant to all districts, including ours. So that's all I have.
And Katie, did I, somewhere in reading about this, I think the Palmyra Eagle School District, there were two districts, they were going to be moved, one of the proposals was to move them into two different school districts. And their funding per pupil in Palmyra was $1,000 per student less than the surrounding districts. So speaks to your funding also. Not only were they having trouble with operational referenda, but they just were getting less funding per student.
Oh.
The process was a real wake-up call to that community, and there's now a sense of urgency, and they know what they need to do to try to salvage their district, including the likelihood of closing one or two elementary schools, which is something that probably should have been done 2 or 3 years ago. But people needed to hear that, and it just unfortunately took on a life of its own, and it got to the brink of dissolution. But the only way that we could give them the opportunity to try every other option was to deny that, because otherwise, it's a done deal, and the district no longer exists. And then the receiving districts were being penalized because the funding is 1/3 the first year, 2/3 the second year, and finally full amount the third year. So it's not fair to anyone involved in the situation.
Unless they take on their debt, right?
And they take on the debt. And the process to dissolve was established well before the revenue caps and the funding tanked. So it just was it was a perfect storm, and we voted to give them the opportunity. And I wish them well.
Oh, go ahead, Rhonda.
I'm not sure if we can pitch ideas to you, Laura, at this point for what you're doing, your work, but I would love to see some sort of report on the DPI audit from Nygren and Thiesfeld.
I'll probably cover that when it's a little bit further down the road. Honestly, sometimes these things are excruciatingly slow, and then all of a sudden a bunch of things will happen very quickly. And depending on when we have our meeting, by the time we actually get to our meeting, it feels like old news. Everyone knows it. So, yeah. But that's going to be a big deal, and if it happens, and I would expect to talk about that at some point.
Is that it? Done?
That completes my report.
All right, thanks. Next is district events. If there's anything anyone wants to let us know about that we might not know about, other than the play, the musical at Southwest.
Isn't Silent Night coming up pretty soon? It is. Yeah, that's going to be at East this year.
It's at East this year.
Yeah.
It's at the.
I've got it on my calendar. Oh. Hang on, somewhere. That would be on a Friday night, right?
It's usually a Saturday.
Sometimes it's Saturday.
Saturday, okay.
It's Friday or Saturday. Anyway, that's coming up. When you get it, you can let us all know. All right, next is board member school visits update.
I go first.
Okay.
I was at Langlade, sorry. I was at Langlade to watch some of the Extra Mile Awards handed out, so it was nice, quick visit. I was at West High School on a visit, and Jason invited me to the new School of Innovation, so I was spent some time there last week.
Oh, am I allowed to go backwards on the agenda, Melissa? Okay. We got information today, but I just wanted to remind people about the open houses coming up. It's at this Sunday, yeah, it's this weekend. So chance to see some of the schools. I've seen some of them, but not all of them, so I'm planning on going. All right, sorry, back to school visits update. Did you finish?
Yep.
Yes, okay. Christina?
Sure, I'll just share too, because for the sake of time, I was at Webster Elementary School at a staff meeting, which was great, and then was at Shebango last weekend, which was incredible, just like mind-blowing. Even my daughter was excited, and she's in 6th grade and doesn't really get excited about much these days. So congrats to everyone that was involved. It was inspirational.
And if you want to see it sort of again, they're doing the Rhapsody in Review, and it'll be the same district show choirs that performed in Shebango will be performing during that. So what is it, Aldo and Da Vinci and Webster and Washington, somebody else. Yeah, it's in February, end of February, I think. And then East, of course. Yeah, it's a good show. And then actually, we got a surprise performance. I was there in the afternoon. Surprise performance by Preble. They weren't expecting them because they were supposed to be in Burlington at a contest, show choir contest that was canceled because of the snow or supposed snow. Anyway, so they came and performed, so that was nice to be able to see them too. I also got to see the Nicolay Ballet Folklorico group on Saturday. I was at Doctorson Recital, and they were one of the recipients of the funds last year and used them to buy the fancy costumes. And so they performed in the lobby during intermission. So, and they performed. They kept going and going. They must have had at least 6 numbers that they did, and these are 4th and 5th graders. So, hats off to the directors that can teach those kids all of that choreography together. But they did a really good job. I also had a visit at Keller with and a tour and spent some time there. Laura?
I was honored to go to a graduation at the jail on the 7th with Katie. That was a very, it was a wonderful event, and there's a lot of people in the room that help these kids on their educational journey, and I was very glad I attended. It was wonderful. I went to the bilingual family night at Edison. It was a very well attended. There were a lot of people there, a lot of families, lots of kids. They were giving out information about the bilingual program, and I was very impressed with the whole event, and I was very glad I went. So I also went to the winter band concert at Preble. And I've been telling pretty much anyone who's willing to listen about this one piece that they did called Godzilla Eats Las Vegas. That was so wonderful. It was lengthy, and it was basically a movie score. But the program had bits of explanation where you could tell what was happening. And an army of Elvises showed up at one point with his theme. There was Liberace, and there was... Frank Sinatra, and then all this. It was just so clever and so funny. The crowd was laughing. It was very well attended. So, and then I did go to the MLK celebration out at NWTC. That a lot of a lot of staff and students from our district were there. Tank Elementary, for some reason, won a bunch of prizes. Other schools did, but Tank in particular had a lot of winners. in the poetry, I think an essay competition. And that's all I've got.
Katie?
Went to the jail graduation and also participated in mock interviews at Franklin.
Oh, yeah, I did that too.
That was very interesting, very interesting. Kids did a great job.
Andrew?
I also got a chance to attend the Extra Mile Awards. That was a great presentation they had over at Langlade. And then also was part, since the last board meeting, Da Vinci School, where I'm the chess coach, hosted their annual chess tournament. So I was part of that, and we did pretty well. But Red Smith came within 1 point of Da Vinci as a team for second, so that was a strong performance in a close competition. And then also coming up, there's some of them are hosted by non-district schools, but there are others throughout the year. And then there's also sponsored through a different organization. Well, actually, it's a school district event with the Green Bay Chess Association as just volunteers and assistants, but there's a district-sponsored chess tournament that's free to district students, and that's also coming up in a couple of weeks, and I believe that's held at Washington again this year.
We done?
Yep.
I spent time at NEW, School of Innovation, as well as John Dewey. I also went to Keller for a visit, and then I attended the DECA competition for middle schools this weekend at Preble. I went to visit, but I ended up being put to work, which was actually great. So.
All right. Next, we'll go to teaching and learning, and that'll be facilitated by Katie.
Thank you, Brenda. I move that the recommendations as well as the open enrollment space availability numbers for the special education programs for the 2020-21 school year as presented be approved.
Second.
Andrew?
My feelings about this issue are not changed. I think that I'm not in favor of closing special ed open enrollment. I think if we get more people coming in, then we just deal with it and do what we need to do to accommodate that. Yep, there are students who would cost more than $12,000, and a once fair system for redistributing those costs no longer exists, and I get it. There's also situations where someone may have a very small amount of special ed services, and the $12,000 that the district gets may be much less than their cost of education. That being said, I do understand the other perspective that there is a potential that because other school districts are not doing the same, that there is a chance that districts could try to reduce their costs by encouraging people to come over to us. I think a better solution would be if all districts work together to say that we're not going to close enrollment. So that's a reality too. I'm going to vote no on the overall package. I'm glad the overall package that will pass does include a little bit of door opening for some high school students. That's good. I considered, but I'm not going to propose a bunch of amendments to try to open up a few spots per category, because I don't want to waste everyone's time on something that's going to vote no. That's something that wouldn't pass anyways, but where last year I think my argument was a little more impassioned, I do see that there's at least a potential of a serious downside if other districts were to try to use Green Bay's openness to selectively send their highest cost students to us. And it's sad that we even have to have that conversation about it, especially when the system before seemed to be fine where the districts just worked out the money. So my no vote isn't reflective of the quality of the report or quality of the work. Yes, I do think we could handle it. Yes, I do think it's statistically likely that it would be much less bad than the worst potential fears here, but that's where I'm coming from. I will probably never vote to close special ed open enrollment if we're still at this point next year. I might want to try a little harder to open a few doors, raise some caps a little bit, but that's where I'm at for right now.
Oh, I thought I saw a hand. Rhonda?
So I voted last year I voted no last year, but I have a different frame of mind this year. I'm going to vote yes, and the reasons are, I did not have staff reach out to me last year like I did this year. I had a lot of staff reach out to me and ask me to consider the integrity of the program itself. I have also noticed in the last year the special education resignations, and I think when we're talking about the integrity of a program and the shortage of staff in general, and we're working around that, I have to feel good that I'm actually allowing students into a program or to receive services that I can stand behind, knowing that we need to potentially work on what we have in place with our own students. And I've been hearing that a lot from staff. So I think about that when I do take this vote. And do I want to close special education to children? No. But I need to think about, I'm hearing from people who are in the buildings working in the programs, and I'm being asked to seriously consider their thoughts. And so I'm going to vote with that in mind. I also am hoping that we can have a conversation just a bit, maybe just something on record to reiterate. I know there was a lot of conversation about maintenance of effort last time. And from what I understand, and I looked into it, I had some people send information to me as well, that there are variances, that it doesn't really come down to that, that there are variances that a district can take when it comes to maintenance of effort. And that's something that really, from my understanding and my personal feeling on this, that's not really what this is, the denial of this really should be about. I think it should be about knowing that we can provide the services that the children deserve and require. So I don't know if somebody wants to speak to the variances, but I'm understanding that they're there.
Christina?
Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, I would say I generally agree with a lot of the comments that you shared. I also, last year, I believe I voted no on this. This year I am going to vote yes. I think to Pete's presentation earlier, this is a terrible situation that districts are asked to be, to basically make a decision on. And I think about people who want to come to our district. I think about families who want to keep their kids together. I think about friends that I know and community members that will be upset by this vote. But I think also too about the teachers and the students that we already have that we need to support. And I think there's things that we can be doing in the short term that can be, looking at the retention of our special education teachers and looking at the turnover. Of course, there's like short-term things, but in the immediate sense, to bring more, to bring a higher need into a school that's already really, a district that's already struggling doesn't seem to be a good decision. So this is a tough vote, and yeah, I appreciate the conversation we had last week. And Pete, again, your presentation today was spot on. So thank you for that.
Oh, Michelle, go ahead. Just, I know that Claudia Henriksen provided you with information regarding the number of staff in special education who are not on, they're on emergency license, and I believe it was 17. That was one of the pieces that certainly fits with what was just discussed now. And in addition to that, there was another 7 that had been posted that 5 couldn't even be filled yet, that we can't find teachers. Is that still the number, Claudia?
If everything goes through with the references and everything that we did today, if we had more interviews today for, again, unlicensed staff, we will have 2 programs that are not
Supported and staff. So again, I think that's,
So it's going from 5 to 2.
it's going down,
Yeah.
but it continues to be being able to service our students well that we currently are serving. And I think that that's been a huge priority that continues to be. So I appreciate that comment. And I also think about the 35 million that, and I think Pete said 37 million. Because special education is underfunded. So again, that it's really about making sure we have high quality teachers in front of our kids that are in our attendance area. The other piece is, and I keep going back, is that every school district across the state, across the country, is responsible to serve their children well in their attendance areas. And that's something that we can't lose sight of as well. So, you know, I don't think anybody wants to close the door. On the other hand, we need to make sure we're serving our kids in the neighborhood well. So, appreciate that.
All right, Sandy?
Sitnikau?
Yes.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Becker?
No.
Shelton?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
I move that the student searches policy 446 as presented be approved.
Second.
Rhonda?
I just would like to clarify something, if you don't mind. Looking for this again. I get lost in this for some reason. C4. So I saw the changes that were in there, but I'm just wondering, I just want to revisit 446, the compare document under 4. It says, to the extent permitted by law, a school official conducting student-related search activities under this or any other board policy may request the active assistance of a school resource officer or other law enforcement official. And this is the part that I'd asked about last time, but it didn't seem to change, and I'm just wanting some clarification. When conducting a search at the request or in conjunction with a school official, the officer may comply with the same standards and procedures as school officials in conducting the search. I'm just wanting to ask again, why may can't be shall?
Because if it's shall, then the officer wouldn't need probable cause. So the word is may, because when the school official directs the officer to conduct the search, they are able to do that under the reasonable suspicion. So they may conduct the search under reasonable suspicion.
But are they in the capacity of a school official at that point? And aren't they following the same procedures and protocols as the school officials?
Yes, but there could be some other issues at play where reasonable suspicion would not be allowed and the officer would need probable cause. So if you use shall, you're going to be requiring the reasonable suspicion, which is the lower standard, versus it being permissible. You don't always want that lower standard for law enforcement officers. So that's why the word is may. Because sometimes you're going to need the probable cause.
So you believe then that statement, because the administrator's asking the SRO to come in and do something, they're still in the capacity of being a school official. That's what I'm.
Sorry, so go back to the first part of the sentence, to the extent permitted by law. So there may be some circumstances where the school official is not permitted to delegate or to ask the law enforcement officer to conduct the search. So in those cases, if a law enforcement officer were to conduct the search, they would need the probable cause, not the reasonable suspicion.
So can you walk me through what it looks like if that, let's just say it was shall. And so can you give me a scenario where what that would look like? I'm just wondering. What is that?
I'm trying to think of a situation where the principal would not be allowed to ask an officer, and I can't, Rhonda, unfortunately, think of a situation.
There isn't one now. I mean, right now it says the principal can just ask the officer. Right now, this policy says the principal can ask the officer, could you please be a school official and do this search in your capacity as a school official? As written, yes.
Yes.
Correct, but the first part of the sentence is to the extent permitted by law. So if there was a situation, I apologize, I didn't research this ahead of time. If there was a situation where the principal wouldn't be able to delegate the authority, the principal wouldn't have authority to conduct a search, there'd be something else at play, then the officer would need the probable cause to conduct the search.
Just like they would need if they were out on the street.
Correct.
They always need probable cause when they're out in the community, not in our schools.
I don't want to say always, but typically, yes.
Typically, yeah.
Yes. This is an extra layer of protection so that we're not saying no matter what, an officer would have reasonable suspicion. Right. This is really to make sure that only in those specific cases can an officer use reasonable suspicion to conduct the search.
Go ahead, Michelle.
When I think about the role of a principal and what or an administrator in a school, and something comes forward, the opportunity to be flexible is really what we're offering here. It offers the administrator more latitude to say, okay, this, I may bring the officer in on this conversation. I've had it, and this is not in this district, but I've worked with police and law enforcement in the past where the probable cause standard needs to be in play for them as well. So I think this is, the whole purpose of this is to provide safety and support for the students and staff in schools. That's the whole intent. Our current policy is pretty vague in what that looks like. This is intended to provide greater clarity. So it actually, I think, adds that layer of clarity around that so that if I said shall, then it's limited. It can only be one way. Am I interpreting that right?
Then an officer would always be able to use reasonable suspicion versus being required to have probable cause in other circumstances.
And that would be limited.
Is that even relevant though? Because we can't override state and federal and constitutional law. I mean, we could, I mean, not that I want to pass such a thing, but if we said the standards for SROs to do a search in our school district is search whatever you feel like searching whenever you want, which I would never vote for, and none of us would. It doesn't matter because they can't just go right. We can't just our changing it in a policy doesn't change the reality.
Correct, that's why it says may.
Except, and we've, so I get that this is probably making it a bit clearer as to when we bring in that you have to be a little bit more clear about, we're asking you to do this search in your capacity as a school official. By the same token, they can't ever, and we talked about this, and I met with Melissa, and we talked about some hypotheticals and went pretty far down the rabbit hole on what about this and that, and what if they find this or that, and I want to be a little cautious so as not to publicly suggest things that would be searchable or not searchable, all of which are things that shouldn't be in school, so I'm not going to be as specific, but I guess my one little bit of concern that I'm left with here, and I do appreciate the some of the things to limit some of these searches for when health and safety are immediately threatened. We have talked in other policies about saying SROs don't do school discipline. They don't do school discipline. They're not there for school rules. So I'm still left wondering if we would be better off with adding something to the policy that says if it's not health or safety at all, that this is one we're not going to bring in the police. Because once we bring them in, you've brought in the police, even if you say you're a school official.
Eric?
My overall feeling on the policy is that our team went out, researched best practice. They were the ones who brought this policy forward because it hadn't been revised in so long. I think we've had good discussion on it. They've made some adjustments, and I want to vote on it as is. And if it fails, then we've got to go back and do it again anyway. But that's where I am.
What happens if, what would be the consequences if we don't pass this?
The policy that's on the books is the policy that stays, and in large part, we are already acting in accordance with this, but it, again, provides those additional protections for kids, such as searching in a private area, giving the information as to what the standards are so families understand that, someone who can search of similar sex, those sorts of things that aren't written, we're already doing because our administrators are doing a great job in doing this, but just, again, providing that better clarity.
Thank you.
Michelle?
I think the other piece that I appreciated that is included in the policy talks about the importance of recording the search, just as we would. And I believe it's already done, but this is another place and space so that if there's ever any questions, you have to identify the reason for the search, the information received, the need for the search, the name of the informant, if any person's present search was, who was there, and what was found. So it really puts a responsibility, making sure the administrator shall be responsible for custody, control, disposition of any illegal, dangerous substance or object. So it really is, if there's ever a question about why a student was searched, it's all defined there. And I thought we had discussion that if the team that meets with you, Vicki, under your, if they ever wanted to go back and have further discussion and review how this is going, if that has changed. I believe our administrators, like Eric said, are doing a very good job. They've done this, and this is just the team came forward to provide further clarification for the very purposes that you explained, Melissa. I appreciate that as well, and both of you and Vicki for this.
Andrew?
Yeah, so we do have in our police school resource officer policy that the resource officer should not have responsibility for discipline in the school. So does that mean, I guess, and yeah, I might be stuck on something that doesn't happen very often, but I have to consider all the possibilities, including the possibility that we might bring in a SRO and find out that that was maybe someone who wasn't a good pick. So, is the if a principal brings in the school resource officer to do some kind of a search for when there is no suspicion whatsoever of danger and only that some school rule was broken, maybe there's some evidence of academic dishonesty or something of that nature, and they still elect to bring the SRO and say, in your role as a school official, I'm asking you to conduct this search? Or should the principal not do that for that one, because then that would be bringing the school resource officer into something that is only a school discipline matter? And I do understand that there's other advantages to a SRO conducting a search because they're more trained, but there might be hidden consequences too. And maybe it's very uncommon that there's searches for when it has nothing to do with health and safety. There probably aren't many of those, I would imagine. But
if I could, I think about this in this way, Mr. Becker. Think about it. I don't know that you can ever consider every kind of search you'll be put in a position to do. I'm sure there are school administrators who have found themselves in places, as I did in 10 years of mine, finding myself in a place where I couldn't have predicted what I was going to find. And I couldn't have said, typically I would say that more often than not, it is for things that are danger and weapons that you would do this. I can't. And that's why I like the latitude in there that says they may be able to bring the SRO in. I would hate to limit it and then all of a sudden find myself as an administrator going down an investigation and finding myself that I need that support and it's not there for me. So I just want, because it is a safety issue that I hadn't predicted was going to be there. That would be my wonderment, is can you really predict every single scenario? And the answer is probably not.
Katie?
Eric, another way of suggesting that we vote on it as presented is to call the question. I made the motion, so I can't call the question. But if you call the question, then we do vote on it as is. We vote to call the question and then vote on the motion.
I'll call the question.
It stops debate.
So Laura you made a motion to call
Yes.
the question. Is there a second? No, that's calling the question, not the
Second.
All right, Sandy? We're voting to call the question. We're ending debate with this vote, and then we will vote on the motion about this policy afterwards if we call the question. Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
no.
Sitnikow?
No.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye. All right, now we will take up the original motion about this policy. Was to approve the policy. Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
No.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
I move that the student searches policy 446 as presented be approved. No, I take that back. We just did that. Do not revisit that. Okay. I move that the searches of lockers, desks, and other storage bins policy 446.1 as presented be approved.
Second.
Rhonda?
So under Roman numeral 3, implementation under B, where it says periodic general inspection of lockers, desks, or other storage areas may be conducted by school official authorities for any reason at any time without student consent or notice and without a search warrant. Is it possible, I understand that this is all school district property. Is it possible to, the context of for any reason, I understand at any time to cover all that, but I mean, for any reason. So living in a world where we know there is implicit bias and racial bias, is there a way to remove for any reason? Let's just, I know we'd like to have, we think everyone has great intentions, but that's not the world we live in today. And is there any way to change that verbiage to something that covers enough but doesn't just for any reason? Any reason. That still covers what you need.
I'm looking back at the principals in the room because I don't walk in their shoes on a daily basis, and I can't sit here at this table and prescript what that would look like for a building principal. This is, this is again in students' interest of safety and security. And if we were to limit this, my concern is for the principals.
Even what you just said. For student safety and security.
Right.
Just sounds, to me, that just sounds more intentional versus for any reason.
So I'm thinking about students who go missing, and there's not an immediate safety interest in needing to search their locker. Or I'm thinking about a student who passes away, and the staff want to go through that locker to get things for the family. I can think of a number of other things where if we limited this just to safety and security, that we would not be able to go into those lockers or desks to be able to retrieve items or get things.
Safety and well-being.
Yeah.
Andrew and then Michelle.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, because I am every time there's the possibility of something mistakenly being turned into a trust issue, I want to point out that it's not. So this is not about principals in this room. It's about the principal. It's about a principal who maybe will be here someday and not last here very long because they like to because they're not a good person. And on rare occasion, it happens, and it's none of the principals we have now. But there is, ultimately, I think there's enough, there's enough protections in here that I can vote yes on this, but I think it is a relevant thing to want to have policies give a little bit of cover for someone to not be in compliance with policy just because, I chose to do a full locker search. Well, you did one yesterday. Yep, I chose to. Would any of the principals in this room do it? Nope. Would any of the principals we have right now do it? Nope. They're doing way more important and better things. I get it, but it's just protection against a bad guy getting the job someday, or gal.
Michelle.
So if you searched just for any reason, I guess I keep going back to, you would only search a locker for a reason, because to your point, Andrew, everyone has better things to do. But more importantly, if I'm searching, that's not a safety security piece, is it a deterrent, if anybody knows that you can go in there at any time, if I find something, I think that that's the piece that I'm wondering. I'm wondering what we're trying to do with changing that language and what that would protect. It's like we're protecting something. What are we protecting? Just the fact
Sorry.
that someone can't come in your locker?
So if I can just offer, so this talks about periodic general inspections. It doesn't talk about searches. So I'll give you an example that parents of teenagers are probably very familiar with. The child who leaves the rotting piece of food in the backpack or the locker, and the mice are now coming into the school or your house, and you're trying to find where the cause of that is, and you can smell it, and you have to go through the custodians need to go through the lockers at night to find the rotting food that is attracting the mice.
That's safety.
Well,
Easy. That's safety.
So that can be true, right? But it also can be true that we have documented school to prison pipeline evidence in this country, and we have the onus is on us at this point, knowing that we are a minority majority district for the first time ever, that we're going to create policies that are intentional around implicit bias. And I believe that we have an opportunity to consider. I'm not sure why we wouldn't even consider that. I mean, there's no, if this is something that we can't absolutely do, that's fine. Then I'd like to hear that we cannot absolutely do that. But I'm hoping we all can consider the world we live in is not the world that we are speaking about. So I think we should be creating policies that have that intention in mind. However we can, I'm asking, and that's my job, to sit here and advocate for what I believe in. And I believe that for any reason is really very just ambiguous, and it does not, it could be used for all kinds of things, obviously, for any reason. And it covers, to me, that I'll give you what you said before. I can see where that would actually potentially give more protection. I don't think this does that. I think we could do better than that. That's how I feel.
Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say very quickly, I feel like that any reason is, I hear all the things you're saying, but I feel like if you said health and well-being and the safety, health and well-being sort of provides that umbrella that is a little bit more specific than for any reason, because God forbid there was a principal who was just going through someone's locker because they just, I don't know, were a terrible person. They would be specifically going against policy unless it fit into that criteria. And I feel like that's broad enough. That's my suggestion. I don't know, the for any reason just seems so broad. And I do worry about students, feeling violated. I understand that we own their lockers. I understand all that, but we also want to have a place, a community place where kids feel like they can not be nervous about that stuff. So take it for what you want.
You want to say something, Michelle?
Yeah, just as I'm thinking about this, I mean, once again, the intention coming forward with this is to provide greater clarity around supporting the students and having clarity for families and whatnot, and staff as well. If I'm understanding this right, we do have a policy in place already that affords this, right?
A different policy?
Yeah, we have a policy that allows searches. We do them. Yeah.
So we're talking, okay.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that people recognize that we have that, so.
Vicki, go ahead.
And that would stand.
I just want to reiterate what Michelle had mentioned earlier. If you look at C, Roman numeral 3C, that's the safeguard. That's how we track and monitor and that wasn't in place before.
Correct.
And could be in place with your passing tonight.
Yep.
Go ahead,
Do
Christina.
you see C as being a safeguard for the, if any reason? Because they are recording it.
And
I'm sorry, it isn't in place because we suspect that it's being abused, but it is an extra layer of monitoring. And quite frankly, it's support for the building administrator too, in case there's question about why a search was conducted.
Andrew?
Yeah, I guess I can, I think I'm okay with C. That, now that I think about it, that does offer a bit more protection. If I'm searching the same kid's locker for the third time this week, because, and again, I get it. People don't like it when I talk about the hypothetical bad guy, but we are a large district. We have had on rare occasion, and nobody, none of our principals now, but we have had people that were not good for this district and good for our kids on occasion. That's who I'm looking at. So I can look at C, and I can say someone who's harassing a kid. Now I've got to write down why I have to write down and turn in to my boss why I searched Noah's locker 4 times this week, and the reason they're getting a little thin. Maybe I'll just stick to not doing that. So I'm okay with it. We don't do, sometimes you have to look at worst case scenarios, I think, in policies. It doesn't mean that it's not a good policy. And certainly when we look at, it's a little scary how little guidance was written into policy before. And this is a big improvement.
This is an improvement.
Yeah. So.
This is the existing policy. Yeah, you can see it in this document. There's not a lot of.
Yeah. All right, Sandy?
Shelton,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Sitnikow,
No.
Maloney,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
Vandenhoevel,
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
I move that the use of canine units in search activities policy 446.2 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Sitnikow,
Aye.
Maloney,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Vandenhoevel,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
That concludes our work sessions.
All right, thanks, Katie. Next is organizational support, and that'll be facilitated by Christina Shelton.
I move that the individual contract language for educators as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Vandenhoevel,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Maloney,
Aye.
Sitnikow,
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I move that the individual contract language for administrators as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Maloney,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Vandenhoevel,
Aye.
Sitnikow,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I move that the individual contract language for managers, technical professionals, and executive assistants as presented be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
McCoy,
Aye. Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
Sorry. I move that the employee handbook changes relating to resignations and liquidated damages as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I move that administrator contracts for the 2021 and 21-22 fiscal years as presented be approved.
Second.
I'm gonna call on myself. I have a quick question. I should have asked this before. I'm sorry. Is there a reason, why is it 2 years and not 1 year for the administrative contracts? Sorry, Terry.
They are not all 2-year. There are 1-year contracts in there. If you look in the last column where there is an asterisk, those contracts are 1-year contracts. We have 22 of those this year. Per policy 222 in section 2C, it outlines that in the first 3 years, the administrators will receive 1-year contracts, and then following, provided there's no documented performance concerns, they move into that 2-year cycle. You're welcome.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
No.
Carried 6-1.
I move that manager, technical professional, and executive assistant contracts for 2021 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. And then go ahead and move the consent. Yeah.
I move that the consent items as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Shelton?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. And then we have future agenda items. Does anybody have anything they want to? Christina?
Yep, thank you. And I know you and I had talked about this, Brenda. Last Friday, the USDA rolled back some of their regulations for school meals. It's disappointing to say the least. It would be nice to have a very quick update from our food service department to see how they will be responding to the rollback of these certain criteria. It would be nice to have Lynette come in and talk about what it means for her department. I anticipate that it's hopefully not going to mean any changes for them, but I think it would be nice for them to show a commitment to the community that we're still committed to serving high quality meals. So that would be my suggestion. I did reach out to them today. I wasn't able to talk to Lynette and Amanda, but I'm hopeful that they could come to our first February meeting. I think no more than 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be a detailed overview, just a response to the USDA rollback.
I thought those were proposed. They actually happened? Oh.
Yeah, I don't know that in the current regulatory environment we necessarily are waiting real long between proposal and action.
All right, anything else? Otherwise, Katie, do you want to read the
Sure.
closed session?
I move that the board reconvene in closed session in room 337 pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, superintendent search. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Second.
Sandy?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. We'll convene back across the hall.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.